Where's Francis?
Attention, please. Would members of the Government Management Committee please come to Committee Room 1 for quorum? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Good morning, everyone. I just want to welcome everybody to meeting number 13 of the Government Management Committee. For those in the room with us, there's a screen in the back corner of the room. It provides real-time updates concerning where we are in the agenda and what's coming up next on the agenda. If you're not in the room, you can also follow the agenda and debate on your computer, tablet, or smartphone at www.toronto.ca/council. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Councillor Davis.
On a point of personal privilege, and I think on behalf of the rest of the members of this committee and myself, I would like to request that since this is the first public meeting of any body of Toronto City Council after the horrific shootings in Orlando, that we take a moment of silence and personal reflection to remember those who were victims in Orlando.
Okay, I'm fine with that. Would everybody like to stand? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Davis. Thank you, everybody. Are there any declarations of conflict under the Ontario Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, I need a motion to confirm the minutes of May 9th, 2016. Councillor Grimes, all in favor of confirming the minutes of our last meeting? Carried. The green sheet in front of you has a list of deputants on two items, number 12 and number 35. We'll go through the agenda now. Item number 1, apportionment of property taxes, June 13th, 2016 is a delegated hearing for 9:45, so we'll hold that. Number 2, cancellation, reduction, or refund of property taxes of June 13th, 2016. That's also a hearing for 9:45. We'll hold that. Number 3 is a presentation by MPAC on the 2016 property reassessment update. It's for 9:45. We'll deal with that after the first two items. Number 4 is also a presentation on the current financial state of OMERS. The next one is also a presentation by OMERS on the progress of the merger of the City of Toronto pre-OMERS pension plans. Number 6 is the Toronto Civic Employees Pension and Benefit Fund payment by fund of external costs, harmonizing amendment of bylaw number 380-74.
I'd like to hold that, please.
Councillor Davis is holding number 6.
I thought
Number 7, request for proposal 9105-167020 for the provision of administrative and underwriting services for employee benefit plans.
Mr. Chair, I held the wrong one. It was 7 that I wanted to hold.
You want to hold 7? Okay.
So I'll release 6.
Councillor Davis is releasing 6. Does anybody want to hold 6? All in favor of the recommendations for number 6? Carried. So number 6 is approved. Number 8, Metropolitan Toronto Pension Plan Actuarial Valuation Report as of December 31st, 2015.
I'll move it.
I haven't had coffee.
I can never say that. Move it.
Councillor Nunziata is moving number 8. All in favor? Carried. No, we just approved number 8. Councillor Davis held number 7. We approved 6. Councillor Davis held 7. Councillor Nunziata, we just approved number 8. Number 9, Metropolitan Toronto Police Benefit Fund Actuarial Report as of December 31st, 2015.
I'll move it.
Councillor Davis, or Councillor Nunziata is moving number 9. All in favor? Carried. Number 10, 2015 Consulting Service Expenditure, City Divisions and Major Agencies and Corporations.
I'd like to hold it.
Councillor Davis is holding number 10.
Sorry.
Number 11, Contract and Service Level Agreement with Cogeco Data Services Incorporated for an Internet Service Provider. I would like to hold that if nobody else wants to hold it. Number 12, Administrative Penalty System for Parking Violations.
I'd like to hold that, please.
Councillor Davis, number 12. Oh, sorry, and there's the speaker. Number 13, amendments to the purchasing bylaw and procurement processes policy.
I'd like to hold that.
Councillor Davis is holding number 13. Number 14, additional funding requirements for the College Park rejuvenation.
I'll move adoption.
Councillor Davis is moving adoption of number 14. All in favor? Carried. Number 15, the Don Mills Civitan Arena proposed replacement at Don Mills Road and Eglinton Avenue East.
I'd like to hold that. Councillor
Councillor Davis is holding number 15.
Sorry. I just-
No need to apologize. Number 16, the Fleet Service Review Detailed Implementation Plan for the Fleet Services Strategy.
I'd like to hold that.
Okay, actually, Councillor Davis, I was going to move a deferral. Staff aren't ready with this report.
Oh,
They would like to withdraw it. So I'm moving a motion that consideration of the item be deferred until the September 6, 2016 Government Management Committee meeting.
Could I just ask, before this goes back, because I think there's just a huge amount of information missing in there, this report, and also to make sure that our unions are consulted. I assume they have been.
Yep.
But I want to make sure that happens.
Okay, thank you. All in favor of the deferral? Carried. Number 17, amendment to the Interfleet Incorporated Automated Vehicle Location, AVL, contract number 470-15982. Actually, I wanted to hold it. Sorry, Councillor Grimes. Number 18, expropriation of a portion of 5795 Yonge Street for public street purposes. Councillor Davis is moving adoption. All in favor? Carried. Number 19, 3630 Kingston Road, a new lease for the Toronto Employment and Social Services Office. Councillor Nunziata is moving number 19. All in favor? Carried. Number 20, a new memorandum of understanding for the Kipling Station redevelopment. Councillor Davis, you want to hold it? Okay. Councillor Davis is holding number 20. Number 21, expropriation of the portion of the rear properties at 2194 to 2210 Bloor Street West, TTC Runnymede Subway Station, easier access and masonry repair projects. Councillor Nunziata is moving number 21. All in favor? Carried. Approved. Number 22, 80 Lothian Avenue, an update report. Sorry, Councillor Davis. Councillor Nunziata is moving number 22. All in favor? Approved. Carried. Number 23, the redevelopment of the St. Lawrence Market North status update.
Move adoption.
Councillor Davis is moving adoption of number 23. All in favor? Carried. Number 24, Union Station Revitalization Project Status Update.
Move adoption.
Councillor Davis is moving adoption. All in favor? Carried. Number 25, a non-competitive procurement for service continuity planning during the potential labor disruption.
I'd like to hold that.
Councillor Davis is holding number 25. Number 26, a lease agreement with the Somali Immigrant Aid Organization of Toronto at 1652 Keele Street. Councillor Nunziata is moving number 26. All in favor? Carried. Number 27, a below-market rent lease extension agreement with the Don Valley Art Club at 666 Eglinton Avenue West.
I'll move adoption.
Everybody's moving adoption. All in favor?
This was a long,
Carried. Number 28, an extension of the sublease agreement at 1761 Shepherd Avenue East with the Harriet Tubman Community Organization for below-market rent. Councillor Grimes is moving number 28. All in favor? Carried. Number 29, extension of the sublease agreement at 1751 Shepherd Avenue East with the Hong Fook Mental Health Association for below-market rent. Councillor Davis is moving adoption number 29. All in favor? Carried. Number 30, extension of the sublease agreement at 1761 Shepherd Avenue East with the Iranian Women's Organization of Ontario, IWOO, for a below-market rent agreement. Councillor Nunziata is moving number 30. All in favor? Carried. Number 31, extension of the lease agreement with the Scarborough Centre for Healthy Communities, SCHC, at 3600 Kingston Road for a below-market rent agreement. They used to be West Hill Community Services. Councillor Grimes is moving number 31. All in favor? Carried. Number 32, French Language Advisory Committee Work Plan for 2016 to 2018, item FA 2.2. Councillor Davis is moving adoption. All in favor? Carried. 33. So 33 is compliance with City of Toronto policies on the French language communications and advertising.
Could I hold that for a minute? Because I think I want to ask questions about the multilingual policy and how this.
I do have a motion that I wanted to move. Recommendation number 1, the letter dated April 28th, 2016, from the French Language Advisory Committee be amended by deleting City Clerk's Office Protocol Services, and recommendation number 1 as amended be adopted. So I'm deleting City Clerk's Office Protocol Services.
I still would like to just hold it if I could and have city manager's office staff.
Yep.
Okay.
Number 34, support for creating a Maison de Francophonie de Toronto. And I also wanted to move a motion this before we refer to the Executive Director, Social Development, Finance, and Administration for consideration. Okay. I have a motion. All in favor? Carried. Item is amended. All in favor? Carried. Number 35, waste diversion services and city facilities. There's a speaker on that. And we have one item of new business. You should have a letter in front of you from Councillor Cressy, which is asking for acquisition of land for parkland purposes in the King Spadina area.
It's actually a report request.
Yes.
Move to introduce.
Yep. So I need a motion to introduce it. Councillor Nunziata. All in favor of the motion, the request? All in favor? Carried. And I think that is the agenda. Sorry, I thought we did. All in favor? Yeah, and then I said all in favor of the item as amended. That's okay. Carried. So the, thank you, Councillor Cressy. Okay, so we're going back to the beginning of our agenda. 13.1, apportionment of property taxes at June 13th, 2016 hearing. I don't think there's any amendments. Okay. Yep. So this is a public hearing. It's apportionment of property taxes. It's a public hearing. Is there anybody in the room that would like to speak to this item? Is there anybody in the room that would like to speak to this item? And is there anybody in the room that would like to speak to this item? So I'm going to move the following recommendation. The Government Management Committee approve the apportionment of property taxes in the amounts identified in Appendix A and Appendix B under the columns entitled Apportion Tax and Apportion Phase in Capping, in/capping. All in favor? Approved?
I guess so.
We're all good. All right, number 2, it's another public hearing, cancellation, reduction, or refund of property taxes for June 13th, 2016. This is also a public hearing. Is there anybody in the room that would like to speak to this item? Anybody in the room that would like to speak to this item? I see a lot of shaking heads no, so I will say one last time. Anybody in the room that would like to speak to this item? Seeing none, I have a motion to move. The recommendation 1 and number 2 of the report of May 20th, 2016 from the Treasurer be replaced with the following. The Government Management Committee approved the individual tax appeal applications made pursuant to Section 323 of the City of Toronto Act 2006 resulting in tax reductions excluding phase-in/capping amounts identified in the detailed hearing report marked as Appendix A, excluding the following application. Appeal number 201-6004 in Ward 19 on Strawn Avenue. Number 2, the Government Management Committee approved the individual tax applications made pursuant to Section 325 of the City of Toronto Act 2006 resulting in tax reductions excluding phase-in/capping amounts identified in the detailed hearing report marked as Appendix B, excluding the following application. Appeal number 201-60038 in Ward 19 at 430 Montrose Avenue. Any questions of the mover? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment? Approved. Item as amended, all in favor? Carried. We move on to item number 3, which is a 2016 property reassessment update. Good morning, gentlemen. You're free to start whenever you're ready. Sorry, the way we usually work things here, after your presentation, each member of the committee has up to 5 minutes to ask you questions on your presentation. After that, we usually bring it to questions of our staff, and then we debate it and vote on it. So you're free to start whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Antony Wisnowski, and I'm the President and Chief Administrative Officer for the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. And with me today, I have Joe Regina. Joe is our Regional Manager for Municipal and Stakeholder Relations, responsible for the City of Toronto, and also Brian Gordon, who's our Account Manager, responsible for the same region. Thank you very much for taking our delegation today. We'd like to provide an update on really what's been going on with the 2016 assessment update, and we'll just proceed through relatively quickly in order to provide opportunities for the councillors to ask us any questions. So one of the things we often want to remind people of is that the property assessment system in Ontario has 3 broad players. Our role is an administrative capacity. We're a statutory entity created under the MPAC Act, and we're responsible for delivery of the assessment in accordance with the Assessment Act and other provincial legislation. The province is responsible for passing the legislation. It sets the policies. It determines education tax rates. And then also independent of the Ministry of Finance, it establishes that part of the system. Under the Ministry of Attorney General, we have the Assessment Review Board, and it operates as an independent third-party adjudicator for the purposes of appeals that are not resolved between ourselves and the taxpayers and municipalities. And then, as you're certainly familiar, the municipalities determine the revenue requirements, they set municipal tax rates, and they're responsible for collection as well as delivery of services. We have a 4-year assessment cycle. This was introduced in the 2007 budget, and this is our 3rd consecutive assessment update in which we are operating on a 4-year cycle. So the 2016 update has a valuation date of January the 1st, 2016. And the value set in 2016 will be delivered at the end of this year on an assessment roll to the municipality, and it will be the basis of assessment for 2017 through 2020 for municipal purposes. As you are aware, there is a phase-in provision that's been introduced to the Act, and that means that any changes that occur in value that are increases in value will be phased in equal increments between 2017 and 2020, and any decreases in assessment will happen immediately for 2017 taxation purposes. For the 2016 update, we took a marked change in the way we would approach the assessment update. If we look back to the 2012 update, we really started our formal outreach and engagement with taxpayers and municipalities in the year of the update itself. And it wasn't until approximately April timeframe of 2012 that we started having preliminary information about values associated with residential and farm properties first. And it wasn't until almost the last quarter of the year that we started socializing information related to commercial, industrial, and non-residential property rates. And what we decided to do for the 2016 update was dramatically change that schedule. We actually began our work in 2014, and we focused on farm and special purpose properties. This was as an outcome of the special business property review that had been undertaken with the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And so we began already with consultations on our approach to valuation related to both farm properties and special purpose properties in 2014. That continued through the end of 2014 and throughout 2015. And our objective was that by the end of 2015, we would be in a position to be able to start reviewing preliminary values associated with all properties and valuation by the end of the 2015 year. Which we did with the exception of completing commercial land rate analysis, which we didn't complete until the beginning of this year. But our purpose was in order to consult early and often with not only taxpayers, but also with municipalities and also with the Ministry of Finance, so that everyone would be aware of where we were headed with the 2016 valuation. In order to establish values, we use industry standard appraisal practices. They are set out by the International Association of Assessing Officers. And then we take into account other best practices. We learn from our companion organizations in Canada and around the world in terms of what are the best approaches for valuation. We're informed by appeal decisions, legislative changes, and so on as we go forward. And we take into account the unique characteristics of properties in each local community as much as possible as we do our valuation. There are really 3 broad portions of a reassessment. The first is a data collection and preparation process. So we try to ensure that we have a maximum amount of information on not only what's happened in the market, but also ensuring that the inventory of properties is as up to date as possible. We then conduct an extensive market analysis, so we have experienced people who are able to produce analytics in order to examine where market sales have occurred, and then we build statistical models in order to determine what the value would be on properties that have not sold in the intervening years. And all of that is calibrated to a January 1st valuation date. And then we go through property review, and that's the process we're in right now for many properties where we are finalizing values by going through individual and neighborhood adjustments on properties in order to deliver the values for 2016. Specific to the City of Toronto, we had over 500,000 touch points of activities associated with properties in the city between the last update and this one, and certainly leading into the last 2 years. So what are the things that affect the property? Well, certainly building permits affect the property. It would be a change in state and condition. We know that when sales occur, sometimes sales appear to be outside the norms of what we would have seen in our analysis. They seem to go beyond where we would have expected the average range of value, so we will investigate those sales. In some cases, we contact the property owners. In some cases, we actually go out to the properties. We often send out questionnaires in order to determine more information. We certainly have a number of inquiries. We have requests for reconsideration. Every time there's a severance or consolidation on property, we deal with those. Any appeals that are initiated, they inform our information. And in every instance, what we're really gaining is two different pieces of insight. One is around the state and condition of the property, and then the second is the value of that property. And so we're constantly calibrating against this information to prepare for the update. One of the things that we've done in concert with the Government of Ontario is we've introduced a very structured advanced disclosure process. And this is particularly applicable to industrial and commercial properties. The government required through a Section 10 directive under the Impact Act for us to undertake 3 levels of disclosure and formal consultation to increase transparency and shared understanding of how we're coming up with the valuation. So the level 1 is a methodology guide, and so what we've produced across a series of property types is a comprehensive guide that explains the assessment methodology that is being used for that class of property. We were required to do this for a number of property types specifically by the government, but we've extended this to all property types. And so we have a methodology guide that's been published for every property type and subclass within the province. So as an example, with an industrial, we'll have a separate methodology guide that explains how we would have applied it to something like an automotive plant versus a food processing facility versus something like a lumber sawmill or something like this in the north. We also have produced similar guides that explain how we deal with multi-residential properties, commercial properties that are income-based, as well as even the broad-based residential experience, which is based on a direct market comparison approach using sales. We then have produced the level 2, which is a market valuation report, and these are the analytic reports. So this provides people with an understanding of the actual market analytics that have driven our analysis and that are the basis for our model. So again, if I use an example of something like a commercial property where we have to determine capitalization rates on those properties, the valuation reports provide an insight into the capitalization rates that have been set across different communities and the variety of those rates. Similarly, anything related to industrial rates, such as replacement cost new of properties, depreciation values, functional obsolescence, or external obsolescence factors. And again, this was in order to allow for consultation in order to correct the valuation before the values are returned. And then the last level is a level 3, which is property-specific valuation information. And this is a detailed information that is available through secure access only to property owners. And it's not only information about their property and how we've come up with the preliminary value on their property, but also for them to be able to look at comparable properties or the properties that they normally compare themselves to in the marketplace in order to determine, again, in advance of the return of the roll to the municipality, that the value has been set correctly and accurately so that we can avoid the appeal process, which is a much lengthier process after the fact. So there are a number of benefits associated with advanced disclosure. Certainly for municipalities, our objective, and this is one of the overall tenets of the government, is to ensure that we have a stable and predictable role for municipal taxation purposes. We wanted to ensure that municipalities are aware of where there's risk arising in their assessment base, and this would be through shifts in valuation as we move between valuation years. Obviously, it's to avoid surprises that come out at the time a roll would be returned, and also to provide an opportunity for feedback. A good example of that would be something that we refer to as lands in transition, and these would be properties that are potentially undergoing a change in use, and we want to ensure that we consult extensively with municipalities to properly identify those properties that municipalities are targeting for a change in use and where we might want to move to an alternate valuation than the current use for that property. The benefits for property taxpayers is, again, an increased understanding and certainly more confidence in the value that's been returned, better access to information and earlier access. Again, this whole opportunity to have no surprise with their value as they receive their notice, and again, an opportunity to provide feedback. And in particular, when it comes to some of the more complex property types, such as commercial properties or industrial properties, we really need the assistance of the property taxpayer to understand if there's been any substantive change of condition on that property that we might not be aware of. When it comes to commercial properties, we need to have a clear understanding of vacancy on those properties in order to build that into any of our baseline analysis for those property types. Just to give you a sense of our property assessment notices this year are going out in a staggered fashion. We actually began province-wide distribution of residential assessment notices on April 4th of this year, and it's a staggered process that goes through the end of August. Residential notices going out first. For the City of Toronto specifically, residential assessment notices were hitting the street as of May 27th, June 1st, and June 6th. The multi-residential and business notices, which would be anything related to industrial properties, commercial properties, and multi-residential, will be mailed on October the 18th. And then anything else that occurs in terms of new residential properties that have come on board in the course of this year, as well as any amended notices that are going out, will be going out at the end of October. So we'll have those values out at the end of the year. So what have we changed in terms of the residential experience this year? And we basically pretty much changed everything. So we went through a redesign on our property assessment notice. We held focus groups with residential taxpayers across the province. We moved to a simplified notice utilizing a clear language consultant. We'd actually determined that some of the language we had in our property assessment notice was targeting a grade 12 level of reading, and the appropriate target for this kind of notice should be something in the grade 6 or grade 7 level. And so we made a real concerted effort to bring in plain and clear language. Some of the key things that we've changed as well is we've really focused on clarity of information about the phase-in of value, as well as the change that has occurred with the request for consideration process, and I'll speak to that later. We've also clarified and introduced fewer words and a little bit more of infographics that explain how the system operates. And we certainly have directed people to our two primary sources for inquiry, the first being our call center, and the second being About My Property, which is our website that people can go to in order to determine whether their value is accurately assessed. About My Property has been completely redesigned this year as well. We've actually, again, ran extensive focus groups that demonstrated that some of the functionality we had in there, while comprehensive, was not that easy to navigate, and so we have simplified the design quite a bit, making it easier and more intuitive, essentially following a model where people will be able to look at properties within their community in a very similar manner to the way in which perhaps they're looking at realty.ca or an MLS listing website. What is also unique this year is that we've integrated two parts of the website that no longer require login access. The first is a section called How Assessment Works. And within this section, people can go in and look at videos on the assessment system, understand how we come up with values, understand the phase-in provisions. That's a new video that's just been launched this week. Understand what they need to do if they're looking for a request for reconsideration. It also provides a video on how to navigate your way through About My Property. And then we've also introduced a market trends area where people can go in and look at maps that generally present the city in a nice infographic format, so that people can determine what the relative changes have been across their community. And we built one of these for every single community in Ontario, and specifically for the City of Toronto. Excuse me, we built a more comprehensive access that allows people to drill down through various layers given the size of the city. There's been a change to the filing requirement for requests for reconsideration. Residential property owners now will have 120 days from the issue date of their property assessment notice to file a request for reconsideration. The issue date is clearly identified on the notice at the very top right, and for every year of phase-in, we actually identify the request for reconsideration date that applies. The R4R deadlines for Toronto for the respective release dates of notices are September the 26th, September the 29th, and October the 4th. And the intention of having an early delivery of the assessment notice and an early 120-day R4R deadline is to allow us to resolve, easy to resolve changes that need to be made on a property. So often we'll find that there's something that we have that's incorrect on a property related to its inventory. Thank you. And in that instance, the owner can contact us, so we can make that correction, and that can be issued through an amended notice rather than a minutes of settlement, which is a simpler process, and it means that as the role is returned to the municipality, there is no further action required. So we're hoping it's going to bring greater stability and accuracy, not only for the taxpayer, but also for the municipality. We have a pretty simple 5-step process that we are asking people to go through. The first thing people should be doing as they open up their assessment notice is they should be asking themselves this pretty simple question: could I have sold my property for the assessed value that we've depicted as of January 1st, 2016? And if that's the case, if they look at that and they believe that is the case, then largely the assessment should be accurate, and they can then stand down and file that notice away for future reference. The next thing we certainly encourage people to do is to review the information that we have on file for that property and go to About My Property, understand what's going on in their neighborhood, understand what's going on within the municipality in order to determine whether there's any other action required. They can certainly contact us through our 1-800 service. They can send us an email. We have a chat service that's available during regular business hours, and they can communicate with us in that regard. If they do see that there's something associated with their property that they think is incorrect, perhaps they have some information about values that have gone on in their around their neighborhood, or perhaps they see something that's inaccurate, they should file a request for reconsideration. That can be done via email or via fax. But the easiest way for people to do that is to file that directly through About My Property, and that will come directly into our queue. We ideally can resolve the issue through the request for reconsideration process, which is a bilateral process between us and the taxpayer. And then, if necessary, and if they're unsatisfied with that outcome, they have an option to go and appeal within the Assessment Review Board. So as I mentioned, as people go into About My Property and they go into the market trends area, we've actually made it a very intuitive interface. People can key in the name of a municipality, they can key in the name of a neighborhood, they can start keying in a street name, and our market trends application will take them to a map that displays what's going on in their community. So what's happened in the City of Toronto? Well, on an overall basis for the City of Toronto, we've seen an average year-over-year increase in the last 4 years of 7.5% in the overall residential values in the city, which is approximately 30% over the last 4 years. No one should really be surprised by those numbers. We've all been reading all the various reports that have come out through the papers, whether it be through the various real estate agencies, CMHC, the banks and the like, identifying that there has been a strong appreciation of residential values in Toronto. We've currently, number of residential properties in Toronto that are being mailed is 729,000. In every case, in every municipality, we have some properties, even on the residential front, that we hold back because we need to do a little bit more work on. But in most cases, that holdback is in the order of 2% at the most. So this represents basically all of the residential notices for Toronto are out. And again, just to remind everyone, the date they should keep in mind for the valuation is January 1st of 2016. So one of the maps that is available on the Market Trends Report, and has also been supplied to all of the councillors in your constituency offices, is an overall property comparison for the city. So you see a 7.5% overall change in residential values, but you note that there's a shift depending on where you are in the various communities of the city. And what we certainly have found overall as a trend is that where you see a slightly lower overall change within a community, it tends to be that obviously the detached marketplace continues to be very, very strong, and typically the condo marketplace is just moving a little bit slower. So in somewhere like the City of Toronto proper, the former city centre, so in those areas you'll find that the condo values are moving not as quickly as detached homes. What you also see is that you see that Scarborough has moved the highest amongst the community, and it is because that is the place where there continues to be an opportunity for people to enter the detached market, and so therefore there's been a higher drive in those areas for market acquisition of properties, and therefore those values have increased more so since 2012 than what we had seen in the previous update. Again, in terms of a market comparison, you can look at the single-family home versus condominium marketplaces, and you see the marked differential between the average assessed change and value for those different markets. So you see that overall in Toronto, we see that the single-family home market has moved by 9.2%, while the overall condo market has moved at 2.9%. you see that the average single-family home is $770,000 as compared to the average condominium of $363,000. And then you can see through the various communities that you're all very familiar with, you see how marked the differentials are in terms of the value of those individual properties, and then also what you see is the change in valuation that has occurred on those various properties. If we can go back that one more, Joe. So the other thing we've seen also is that you see that there's, again, a slightly different situation that occurs on townhouses and row houses, as well as semi-detached homes. So every one of these different types of property has its own market that we're aware of. They move at different rates. There's a different median value and average value, and there's a different demand for that housing stock in the city. I'm briefly going to also mention that we also have relaunched a new strategy this year under our outreach with municipalities. We have a new tool that's been redesigned called Municipal Connect, and it's a more modern and flexible way for municipalities to deal with assessment information and to examine their preliminary information. And we've provided that and provided training to your constituency offices in that regard. There's a dashboard. We allow you to monitor specific properties. You can search for properties. We provide a complete access to the appeals and request for reconsideration dashboard as well as a series of reports going forward. We continue to provide training and support through our municipal and stakeholder relations group and through a series of FAQs, user guides, as well as a comprehensive package that we provided to you, and that has been provided to you in all of your constituency offices.
Great, gentlemen. Do you have many slide decks left?
No, I'm actually going to wrap up right after this.
All right, thank
So
you.
also, we've been working closely with the city in terms of allowing our content to go out. We actually designed a buck slip that went in with your tax bills as an insert, cooperatively with your communications group and with your revenue services branch, and we continue to work very closely with you going forward. The last section is around service level agreements. It's just really provided for your information, and at this point I can close off the formal presentation and open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Sorry, Councillor Lee was here. Questions from committee members? Councillor Davis?
I actually didn't see that last slide. Service level agreements, about accountability?
Yes.
Service parameters, support needs, key performance indicators.
So we are starting this year. We went through a comprehensive process actually and worked collaboratively with municipalities across the province over the last year.
Is this new that you're going to create?
This is very new. So we've never had a formalized service level agreement with municipalities. And so this establishes at this point 12 different key performance indicators that were recommended by the municipal community as a measure for us to be able to have very concrete discussions on our performance between ourselves and the municipal staff.
And these will be able to be reported out?
So our intention is to report them quarterly and then continue to meet on a regular basis with staff on that basis.
And have those benchmarks been developed?
Yes, in concert, and we're right now actually going back to the municipalities to finalize that agreement. So we've been working very closely with your revenue services group on that, on finalizing that with the city. Okay. It would include things such as assessment growth, responsiveness on vacancy rebates, severances and consolidations, the accuracy of the roll as it comes out across both residential and non-residential properties.
So we would get the assessment growth numbers at a certain time in our budget process?
Yes.
That kind
so
of
it's
thing?
And not only about the provision of the expected growth, but also ensuring that we've been try to ensure that all assessment growth is on within 1 year of occupancy. So we continue to measure against that objective as well.
Great. So I just want to say, it looks like you've been doing a lot of work over the last 4 years. It's excellent. It looks excellent. And I presume that this addresses all of the recommendations that came out of the Auditor General's report some years ago.
So I would say that we continue to reference not only the Auditor General's report, the special purpose property review that was undertaken by currently Minister Del Duca, at the time Parliamentary Assistant, as well as continuing to reflect very much the spirit that was intended by the Ombudsman's report of 2006.
Yes.
And we have met with the Ombudsman on all these changes again this year.
Okay, and one of the big issues for residents, and we get questions all the time, how did they come up with this assessment? And the issue of transparency and explaining the valuation. You talked about it on slide, there are no numbers. I think it's about slide number 7, and then it's a upside-down pyramid.
Yep.
I wonder if you could put that up. It talks, because
Yes, the one on how we come up with the valuation? Yes.
Right. So these guides, are they all available?
Yes,
So
everything's available
residents
online.
can-
The market valuations are available online. The market trends are available online. And if people go into About My Property, I think the best thing people can do if they really want to explore, they can go to a map, look at their property. Everyone knows the properties on their street that have sold. Everyone knows what houses are just like theirs. And they can poke around and really look at that and gain some confidence that it's been equitably treated.
But the methodology
The methodology
is
is also there.
somewhere they can find.
And there's a very simple video that they can watch that explains how we deal with valuation on residential properties.
Okay. You used to organize information sessions, community information sessions, and I'm wondering if you're planning to do any of those.
Absolutely, we are, and we're also happy to work with your constituency offices in that regard.
Okay.
And one of the things we are trying to plan is what we're referring to as a pop-up event. So we basically do an About My Property pop-up event that we're looking to do right here in City Hall, and we're just coordinating that with city staff in order to be able to provide that.
And do you know if the MPPs are organizing this?
So we've been doing extensive outreach with all the MPPs as well. So we actually held a Queen's Park Day back in April, actually late March, and we held that day with all of the legislature of all parties, and we've been out to the constituency offices briefing them as well. Joe and Brian's mandate is not only municipal relations, but all of our stakeholders, including the MPPs.
I'm just wondering if you know if the maybe I can talk to you about that later, if the MPPs, if you're aware of any who are organizing it. I'll talk to you after, if that's possible. The two last questions, and I only have 20 seconds left, have to do with language and accessibility to human beings and face-to-face questions and answers, as opposed to a 1-800 number.
Yes.
How are you addressing that? Language barriers and people who just need to talk to people in person.
Yes, so we have, so through our 1-800 service, we certainly provide a lot of contact, but our office is still open. We're on Yonge Street, and so people can come into our office. They can also book an appointment. So if they call our 1-800 service and they really want to talk to the assessor, then that is passed on to the local field office and people can meet with that assessor. We also believe that those outreach opportunities are those.
Are you organized by field offices? So
We are organized by field offices, and Toronto is our largest field office.
all right. So if, for instance, our community, our civic centers, which have access to tax information as well, were to have a day
Sure.
in a civic center where you had a drop-in, where people could come and,
We would love to participate.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Other questions of the presenters? No? No? Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you coming in. The next item on our agenda is the current financial status of OMERS. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I need a motion to receive the presentation. Councillor Nunziata, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, gentlemen. Yep. Good morning, Mr. Penicetti. Welcome back to City Hall.
Through you, Mr. Chair, councilors, good morning.
You know
As
how it
you're-
works here?
Sorry?
You know how it works here?
I know how it works, and for those that don't know, I am an appointed board member by the City of Toronto to OMERS, effective January 1st of this year. We're here because of the motions that GMC passed back in February. I have colleagues that I'll introduce before we get going. To my left, David Beattie, who has been your representative on the board for a term plus. David has 25 years of investment banking experience and has been a huge asset to the OMERS board and also, of course, to the City of Toronto. I want to introduce as well Warren Bell, the COO, and Jonathan Simmons, the CFO, who will be presenting your second question related to the pre-OMERS programs. So David and I will cover the issue that the chair highlighted in terms of the annual update that you requested, as well as the financial update. And then we'll turn it over to Warren and Jonathan related to the pre-OMERS plans. I'll go very quickly because I know you've got a heavy agenda still to cover for the rest of the day. I will cover off the overview of OMERS membership, rules and responsibilities of the two boards, as well as the OMERS 2020 strategy. David will then cover off the review of the 2015 financial results. Very quickly, membership, you probably aren't aware how big OMERS is. 461,000 members, 278,000 active employees that are that are members of OMERS, 141 that are 1,000 that are pensioners. A weird category at the bottom there, 42,000 deferred that I can explain later, but basically those are employees that have been probably on short term and are holding their pension that they've accrued temporarily. I do want to highlight that out of that 278,000 active members, the City of Toronto makes up almost 15% of the active members between the City of Toronto employees combined with the agencies, of course, including police, hydro, TCHC, et cetera, library. A note that you will, I know you're well aware of the full-time, part-time split of 73%. More than a quarter of the active members are in the part-time category, which we'll speak to in a few minutes. And the other issue that I think everyone's aware of, a growing percentage of female members, employees, as well as members of OMERS relative to male. I won't get into the age thing because it's too difficult for me. Composition of the two boards. And a reminder, a lot of employees even are not aware that there are two boards for OMERS. We have rules and responsibilities for what's called the Administrative Corporation, and that's 15 board members. That's the left-hand side, 7 each from the employee and employer. There's an independent board chair, which is common in the industry. And the main responsibility, I shouldn't call it day-to-day responsibility, but it's the administrative oversight of the plan. The pension administration, investments, and plan valuation is the main responsibility for the Administration Corporation. And that's the one that David's part of. I'm part of the OMERS Sponsors Corporation. There's 14 members there, 7 each again of employee and employer. There's 2 co-chairs represented from the existing employee sponsors as well as the employer sponsor. They are important in terms of representing those 2 categories. And basically, the Sponsors Corporation is more of a governance oversight role. Plan design, contribution rates, and the board composition and appointment are the main responsibilities, roles, and for the Sponsors Corporation. I won't spend a lot of time on this next slide that actually gives you the members of the Sponsors Corporation. On the left-hand side, it's the employer reps. On the right-hand side is the employee, what's called the plan member reps. You'll see that there's representation, of course, from AMO, from the City of Toronto, from police, hydro, actually Children's Aid Society, as well as the Catholic School Board for employers. And of course, in the plan member side, it's professional associations as well as unions, CUPE, Ontario Public Service Union as well. You have the Police Association, and you'll notice Frank Romano, that's the co-chair, and he's actually the City of Toronto head of Toronto Firefighters. He's representing the Ontario Professional Firefighters. As well, Tim McGuire, CUPE Local 79. So there's a lot of Toronto representatives, if you will, on this board through their various organizations. Tim rotates, Local 79 and Local 416 actually rotate their appointment on this corporation. On the AC side, as we call it, the administration side, here's the members as well. You see David Beattie there as the City of Toronto representative. You see George Cook on the top left as the board chair, the independent chair that I referred to earlier. And again, all the representatives from the various associations as well as employers for the AC, as we call it. Very quickly on duties, like any board, the duties of the directors for the Sponsors Corporation, I have a fiduciary duty to look after the best interests of the corporation, and technically not for an individual stakeholder such as the City of Toronto. I am I'm appointed by the City of Toronto, but I'm representing the corporation and the stakeholders of all stakeholders on the board. Same thing for David related to the administration committee corporation. A fiduciary role related to plan members is the key to our responsibility and our role on the board. So that's very quick background. Now, an update on the recently, October 2015 approval of the OMERS 2020 strategy, which I think will be a background for you before we get into the financials. It was approved, as I said, in October of 2015. And the strategy really is a roadmap for how we will deliver our mission to provide secure and sustainable defined benefit pensions to our members. And this has evolved in terms of a strategy. It's been a very collaborative approach in terms of both boards working together to come up with what we're referring to as an inclusive strategy that's targeted both growth and innovation in our plan, focusing on a balance between pensions as well as investments. And when I say pensions, meaning focus on our members, employers, and stakeholders. And of course, our approach to investments is key relative to our strategy. There are three themes to the strategy at OMERS, and these respond to the evolving conditions for all pension plans across the world in the form of long-term trends. The first one on the left there, changing demographics. We all know that we're all aging, so the retiree relative to active members is growing, which has an impact on the plans, and that's a key challenge and a key theme for us. And that challenging investment environment that we have at times, including 2015, that David will cover in a few minutes, is something that we always have to keep an eye on. And then thirdly, the pension landscape is changing, as we all know. We have federal and provincial governments that are looking very seriously at enhancing their plans, and we have to monitor that as well at OMERS. Our vision for 2020, again, three key objectives. Number one is to increase and fund our plan fully no later than 2025, and our goal in 2020 is to be 98% plus funded. And that's protecting the plan for market volatility and ensuring that we have stable and predictable contribution rates and benefit levels, which I know all councillors are very interested in, not just for our own city, but for all plan members. Satisfaction rate. OMERS has put a very, very strong emphasis on relationship with all stakeholders, all plan members, and right now has a 90% satisfaction rate in terms of high quality service to members, employers, and stakeholders. We're managing our cost effectively, benchmarking against all other plans across Canada and literally globally to ensure that we have a very efficient operations. Again, in terms of the strategy, there's 4 key pillars that fall out that we're focusing on. The first pillar is to protect our funded status using a robust approach to funding management, and this includes ensuring that we have resiliency in our program, and the plan, again, is fully funded by 2025 and virtually fully funded by 2020. The second pillar is building quality relationship with members, employers, and stakeholders that I referred to, but also includes what we're doing today. We're going to be more, we're enhancing our reporting and more transparent to our stakeholders, including yourselves. And then third pillar, involving our capabilities and business model to deliver even better value for our pension dollars. Again, back to enhancing our technology and ensuring that we have efficiency in terms of costs, minimizing costs for operating the plan. And finally, of course, a key fourth pillar, delivering between 7 and 11% over the long term in terms of our annual investment returns. And then finally, in terms of my side, just a few examples of the investments recently that have occurred within OMERS. Example in Canada and Ontario, Bruce Power, a high-quality infrastructure asset that generates steady cash flow for our pensioners. Investment in the UK, in terms of an insurance company, the example there, but significant real estate investment doing very well that you'll hear in a few minutes in terms of London. And North America, Boston real estate market, we actually are the second largest holder of real estate in terms of Boston as a city, in terms of OMERS relative to Boston real estate market. That is my quick overview, and I'll turn it to David to cover the financial results for 2015.
Thank you very much, Joe. My name is David Beattie. I've been a Toronto resident for 58 years. And it's my honor to be here. As I go through the financial results, if there's any terms or acronyms I use, please don't hesitate to interrupt. The fund at the moment is 91.5% funded, and we had a 6.7% return. We're driving to get 98% funding by 2020 and to be fully funded by 2025. And this was despite slow economic growth, very low interest rates, and market volatility. As you can see, the trend has been favorable in terms of the funding. 2008 resulted in a low water mark in 2012 with the smoothing process. Funded ratio is really the classic indicator of financial health of the fund, and there's a steady trend as this improves. There are no planned changes to either contributions or benefits this year. As Joe mentioned, the plan is dealing with the demographic challenges. We currently have roughly 2 active members for each retiree. By 2024, that'll be about 1.4. As the plan matures, just as someone looks at their RRSP, and as they get on in years, we have to be more conservative, prudent, and careful with the funding, especially in light of market volatility. Over the next page, you'll see the financial markets in 2015. It was a difficult year in the stock markets. The TSX was down 8%. The S&P was up only 1.4%. The world markets, 2.6%. And you can see that the Treasury bonds returned only less than 1%, oil off 30%. So we have low interest rates, poor returns on global, and a significant sell-off in commodities. Nonetheless, OMERS had a 6.7% return. This met our funding requirement of 6.5%. I know when I talked to Rob in January or February, he was pleased it wasn't worse given how hard the equity markets were. This is principally thanks to diversification and the fact that we own a lot of private assets. These private assets which is about 48% of our combined portfolio, gave us a 14.5% return. It was a bit short of our internal benchmark, but nonetheless, let's look at each individual asset class. So here you can see the impact of the public markets. Our assets are split roughly 40% in Canada, 30% in the US, 20% in UK and EU, and 10% elsewhere. And clearly, the public markets, you earn barely 1% on average across those markets. We were pleased that private equity, infrastructure such as Bruce Power, the railway tunnel from Windsor to Detroit, the infrastructure assets we own, pipeline in Europe, did very, very well. And real estate had one of its best years ever. That's one of the best returns of any real estate company in North America. So the infrastructure basically provides stable, steady cash flows. The real estate portfolios, 5 years ago, Oxford decided to diversify out of Canada somewhat, started assembling larger portfolios in 3 or 4 major cities, being New York, Boston, and Washington, and London, England. The New York and London markets have been very favorable to us, and we've been selling assets there. Our public markets did not meet either their goal or their intended asset return. Over the next page, you can see the allocation for 2015, 52% public assets and 48% private investments, roughly split equally between real estate, infrastructure, and private equity. You can ask why, if the returns are so great on privates, do you not invest more there? There is a certain level of liquidity required to be able to pay the pensions on any given year. Some of the assets on the private side, that is more difficult. The fund in total is close to $80 billion, and 90% of our assets are managed in-house to keep the expense ratio and the fees down. Over the next slide, we'll go through each individual asset class. We increased exposure to public equities, which once we got through the gut-wrenching January-February period has turned out to be a favorable thing. Inflation-linked bonds, we had a large exposure, which we reduced, and we've increased our cash amount. So again, cautious, prudent, carefully managed money. To protect our funded status and in alignment with the strategy that Joe outlined, we have done a new asset mix strategy, and we've built in certain strategic margins. The returns are smoothed. We actually have a buffer of 2 or 3% on the funded ratio. Build quality relationships. One of the transactions, the Brit transaction, which was up in the photo earlier, was with Prem Watsa, a noted investor from Ontario, and it was a relationship between our head of capital markets. Customer service excellence continues to be a focus as we build these relationships. We're evolving our capabilities in our business model. We very actively monitor the management expense ratio. We know exactly what it is. It's actually considerably better than teachers, and that is a focus. It's brought up in virtually every board meeting, and it's well known by the managers. And then finally, deliver 7 to 11% net average returns. We'll do this through continued diversification, quality asset injection, selection, and assessing new opportunities. And that's it. If there's any questions, we'd both be delighted to address them.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Any questions for Councillor Davis? Questions from Councillor Davis?
A slide that shows shifting from a 1-to-2 model to a 1-to-1 model of, here it is, of active members and retired members. Are you able to, I mean, much of this obviously is as a result of demographics, but there must be also this change occurring as a result of losing employees in the public sector. In other words, there are fewer people participating in the OMERS pension plans as a result of reductions in people who are eligible because of contracted out work or reductions in employees. Are you able to expand upon this so that we have a better understanding? This sustainability model is very worrisome because it isn't sustainable at 1-to-1. So should we not be looking at how we maintain sustainability through maintaining members?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor, I believe that the majority, lion's share of this reduction is pure demographics. Is it partly related to not as much growth as back in the 80s and 90s in the public sector compared to today? Probably, but we don't have at OMERS all that level of detail of information. But at the end of the day, we monitor the demographics and we do the best we can to forecast these as you see to 2024.
But
So
do you
there
have-
is a
I'm just
continuous-
wondering if you do have more information. I'd love to see it at another time, if it, to show the percentage of active members within municipalities, within the broader public sector who are.
Warren has more information.
So our total growth last year was well over 2%, and our net growth was about 1.0%. So while you would expect that it might be falling back, it hasn't been. So our growth is we've actually been growing, and we continue to grow.
In terms of the number of
In
members?
terms of numbers, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And of course,
So you haven't seen a trend of contracting out across municipalities? We're certainly seeing it here, so.
right, so we wouldn't see that. We only see what comes into OMERS, and we continue to grow. But we're shifting from an organization or a pension plan that served primarily full-time members. So we're growing faster in the part-time space, and we're growing women faster than men, because 85% of part-time workers in the municipal sector tend to be women. But we continue to grow, although modestly
So it would
and
be
slowly.
great to see the differences between full and part-time. I mean, there's a certain level at which you have to be eligible as a part-time employee.
That's correct, yes.
How many thousand hours? 2,000 hours a year or something like that? 1,800? Yeah.
700 hours of work in the previous 2 years, or 35% of YMPE, and we are working on that very issue to try to lower it. But we're working through whether or not our municipal partners, employers, whether or not that works for them or not. So we'd like to bring in more.
I'm sorry, you'd like to?
We can
Cover
bring
more.
in and cover more of the part-time workforce than we do today.
I would love to, after this, get any further information on part-time versus full-time and
We can do that.
less. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Other questions of the deputants? No? I just want to ask quickly, so in terms of the pension plan, so you have 5 different investment arms as well in OMERS. It's not, often I have people that say, well, it's OMERS, they look after our pension, but you have 5 different investment arms that invest in a wide variety of different things. I was just joking with our CFO. I said, I understand that one of the investment arms just bought nursing homes or owns nursing homes in Ontario, for example, and some corporate investments as well.
Mr. Chair, there are 4 principal groups that we invest from. The largest single one would be OMERS Capital Markets, which is the 52% in public markets. And I'd refer to the pie chart. I'm just trying to find the page. Page 22. So the largest is OMERS Capital Markets. and it is roughly $44 billion, right, of the 80. Next would be Oxford Properties, which is our real estate vehicle. It's actually our largest employer. We have 3,000 employees at OMERS, 1,900 are at Oxford. Oxford also manages properties for other pension funds and has an active goal to get its net SG&A down to zero by earning revenue doing that. Infrastructure is the former Borealis infrastructure. That portfolio is about 50-50 North America and Europe. It's been extremely successful. It invests in things like power generation, pipelines, any sort of water or natural gas utility, recently some airport investments. Private equity is the fourth pillar of the investing arms. Again, it is based out of Toronto, New York, and London, and we look at a wide variety of industries. We try to focus on companies that have steady, stable cash flows, often in fragmented industries where we can roll up little competitors into a larger, more profitable entity. Our most recent win, believe it or not, was in auto collision centers. And Caliber has turned out to be one of our biggest wins just by putting together more and more body shops and running them in an earnest, efficient manner.
Okay. And then I also understand recently from reading, you've also, one of the arms is investing in distressed companies. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's OMERS Strategic Investments, which falls under Blake Hutchison in the Oxford side of things. He's the CIO of Strategic Investments. There's a small fund run by Phil Evershed and Barry Goldberg, who are two experts in the area out of CIBC and Genuity, and then Canaccord, and they've put together a fund that we have put, I believe, either a quarter billion or 300 million. But again, comparatively small amount versus an $80 billion fund.
Yeah, okay. And I guess, so just the last thing I wanted to ask about, so if I look at the different arms of OMERS and the pension contributions, so if I looked at the capital side of things, for example, so would you say 2/3 of the capital was from investment returns and about 1/3 pension contributions? Or is it?
I'd have to ask Jonathan,
I can answer that.
our CFO. Yeah.
So if you think about that, for every 15 cents that a member contributes, their employer contributes another 15 cents,
Yep.
and they get $1 in pension in the future.
Yep.
So that's so it's about a 70-30 split, 15 cents or 15% of which comes from the member themselves.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Oh, Councillor Davis has one more question.
You were talking about cost per member. I'm trying to find it on this sheet compared to teachers. Could you just tell me what the numbers are?
Yeah, and just, it's about $180, $85. I'm just trying to get.
We're very close to the cost of teachers, but it's highly influenced by a couple of factors, and one of them is investment in technology has a big influence on the fluctuation of that number, but we're in the proximity of teachers.
Just
And we
tell us
sit-
you're not investing in Uber.
No.
Thank you.
No, I'll just move receipt.
Anybody want to? I want to thank you for coming in, gentlemen. Sorry?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we had the second piece that you asked for on the pre-OMERS plan. Warren and Jonathan can speak to that very quickly.
Yep. I just want to thank you for coming in this morning. Part of the rationale for Joe and David coming in was they are appointed by our city manager to represent our members, and our membership is close to 15% of OMERS. So I want to thank you, gentlemen, for coming in today. Thank you for your great work representing our members and employees and retirees for the City of Toronto, and I look forward to seeing you next year. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And a motion to receive Councillor Nunziata, all in favor? Carried. And we're on to our next item, which is, sorry, 13.5, our progress on the merger of the City of Toronto pre-owners pension plans.
So maybe Councillor Davis, I'm Warren Bell, Chief Operating Officer. I'm going to take a really quick try at the answer to the question from before because it came to my mind. We anticipate there's about 100,000 part-time workers in our 1,000 employers, 60% of which earn less than $3,500 a year, you know, the summer lifeguards, et cetera. So there's still a fairly significant population of about 40,000 part-time workers who are above that number. So that's probably, I think that's what you were looking for. So this particular segment I'll be quite efficient about. We're talking about the pre-owners plans. And so in 1968, all new employees of the city, all new full-time employees of the city joined OMERS as their pension plan, which means that when you fast forward from 1968 to 2016, there are about almost 6,000 members from the pre-OMERS plans. There's 5 pre-OMERS plans. All of them are either retired or no longer working and deferring their pension except for one person, worth about $1.7 billion. And in November of 2015, the province gave us regulations to allow for merging of those plans, potentially merging those plans into OMERS. We immediately started to work with city staff at their request to look at the feasibility of doing that in a way that is financially positive for the city and for OMERS and for the members as well. And so we started that project at that time, and the project plan was set. We're running on time, and we believe that we will run this project on time. We've selected one of the plans to actually do a deep dive and a business case on to determine whether or not there's financial feasibility to proceed for the benefit of the city. But I can tell you that working with the city staff is very transparent, very open, and very good. So I think that probably covers this point as deeply as you are looking for.
Councillor Davis, you had questions?
Are we on item 13.5?
Yes.
And who's
Yep,
presenting?
he just made the presentation. That's the timeline they provided.
Yeah, so that is the timeline and all of the steps, and I can just assure you that we believe at this particular point in time, because we have the data from the city on time, that we will run that project and all of the steps on time for a pretty good look at a decision by the end of this year or the fall of 2016.
Which plan are you looking at a deep dive for?
Well, we haven't actually established which of the plans yet because we've got the data. We want to take a plan that makes sense to both the city and is pretty straightforward to start with, although the city staff have asked us to look at 2, I think, and we've agreed to 1. We may do 2, but we'll only do the second one if it doesn't hold us up and slow us down from coming to a conclusion.
Okay.
And that's all.
Okay. All right. Any other questions of the deputants? No? Okay. And I just have a quick amendment. Maybe we'll just hold this down while the clerks finish the amendment. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, welcome. It's just for them staff to report. Asking for staff to report semi-annually on a progress report of this process. All right, all in favor? I'm asking for, all right, all in favor? Item is amended. All in favor? Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, our next item is, sorry, we're number 12? All right. Do you want to? Number 7, request for proposal for the provision of administrative and underwriting services for employees' benefit plans. Councillor Davis? Councillor Nunziata? Councillor Davis, you held number 7.
Yes. So the increase in the costs of the proposal before us is how much? And how does that compare to previous administrative contracts? Contracts for administration of our benefits.
Who would like to answer? Who would like to try and answer?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. So the anticipated increase in the service costs, the administrative services fees and the pooling charges will be for the 3 participants, approximately $22 million over the 5 years, of which the city's portion of that is about $10.6 million over the 5 years of the contract.
Okay, and is that, have we budgeted for that, or this is another budget pressure?
Through you, Mr. Chair, in 2017, it will be a budget pressure, yes.
Of a couple of $1 million?
Yes.
Right, okay. So you structured the RFP differently this year. Can you just explain that in this contract?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So in the previous RFP, there was a requirement for the individual bidders to be able to provide all of the services that we required, those being health, dental, and all LTD and the insured benefits. In order to try to enhance the ability for companies to bid, the format of the RFP was changed such that bidders could bid for 2 categories of services. They could bid for the health and dental services, or they could bid for the LTD and insured services, or they could bid for both categories.
And just to summarize the outcome then, it was Green Shield that won the, or you're recommending, and was the best, or I guess, for the health and...
For the Category A, the health and dental services, Green Shield was the successful participant. And for the insured, LTD and insured, Manulife was the only bidder.
And Manulife didn't meet some minimum requirement? Is that for the health and dental? I mean, they have been our health and dental for so long. How did they not meet a minimum requirement?
So,
Or do we have to go in camera or something?
there was also through discussions and through work with the participants and in consultation with others, one of the priorities and issues, objectives of this RFP was related to systems reporting and fraud detection. And so there was a subcategory. You had to meet an overall threshold of a certain amount, and then there were 2 subcategories focusing on the priorities that we identified in the importance of fraud detection systems and systems in reporting. And in those areas, Manulife didn't meet the required sub-thresholds.
So we set up this sub-threshold because we were having problems with Manulife in this area, or?
We set up,
Yeah.
through you, Mr. Chair, we set up the threshold because of the importance and the issues that were occurring in the benefits area around fraud, and also having more robust reporting mechanisms that were advised of in timely manners from the carriers.
Right. And Green Shield, where have they been the similar service provider of a large employer similar to us, public sector?
Through you, Mr. Chair, so Green Shield is limited and more of, I guess, an expertise in the health and dental area. In terms of employers our size, there's not a lot. but they certainly have a large municipal clientele. They have, I don't know, 15 to 20 municipalities throughout Ontario, other large municipalities, including the city of Calgary. They've also provide to 2 hospitals in Ontario and a few police boards in Ontario. So they do have a fairly large, again,
But nothing.
employers our size are hard to find, but they do have a large municipal clientele.
And how long had Manulife had that contract?
For the new city, Manulife's been the carrier since amalgamation, and they were previously the carrier for a couple of the former municipalities.
And so you're recommending a 5-year contract with delegated authority to you to extend for another 5?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct, for an additional 2-year option of 2-year extensions. 2 one-year extensions, sorry.
So 7 in total,
7?
up to 7 in total.
With a new provider, wouldn't it be, I don't know, I'd feel more comfortable if you reported back before you extended. So we know how this is going with a new provider. Would you be willing to do that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would be up to council to, or committee and council to decide whether if you want us to report back or not.
Okay. Thank you. I have a motion to request the CFO or, I guess, the city manager. Is that right? City manager?
No, CFO. This is, through you, Mr. Chair, CFO would be fine.
Even though it's an HR thing? CFO.
Actually, the employee health benefits contract is under the CFO. It's under pension and payroll employee benefits.
Okay. If, Mr. Chair, maybe I can just write it or say it out loud, that request the CFO, Deputy City Manager, to report to council, to Government Management Committee at the end of the 5-year prior to the end of the 5-year contract, with any recommendations for extension.
Okay. Any questions of the mover? They're still typing.
It's going to cost us, maybe I'll just give a rationale. I mean, yes, I've seen the list. Mr. CFO has provided me the list of the other municipalities that have provided similar services, that Green Shield has provided similar services to. And while there's a long list, there's only a couple that are even close to the size of the City of Toronto. I mean, there's Calgary. And I think it's a more costly program. I know it probably costs more for the enhanced security, fraud detection components of this contract. And I guess I'd like to see what are the results. How is Green Shield performing before we authorize up to 7 more years of this contract?
Okay. Any questions of the mover? All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Sorry, let's do that again. All in favor of the motion? 2. Opposed? 2. And that loses on a tie. Right. Recommendations, all in favor? Opposed? And that carries. All right, our next item is number 10, 2015 consulting service expenditures, city divisions and major agencies and corporations, held by Councillor Davis. Councillor Davis? Councillor Davis, we're on number 10, which you held, the consulting report.
I just really want to understand the expenditures by different years were quite significantly different. Some divisions spent a lot in some years and a little in others. Is there like a blanket contract for, I recall there being a blanket contract for consulting services, and an RFP went out at some point, and we contracted with, we're doing, Ipsos Reid is now doing surveys and public opinion polls that each department seems to be using in if and when they choose, and I'm just wondering, could you explain how we've secured the services?
Through the chair, there used to be a roster of consultants that the city manager's office had set up, and that was used for like the core service reviews and the service efficiency reviews. That wasn't renewed. The city manager's office had come to us to renew it. So divisions are primarily getting consulting services either through their direct RFP for that particular service, or some may be setting up a roster for a smaller subset. There's also a blanket contract for Ipsos Reid that was done through an RFP, and that is open to any of the divisions to utilize with respect to any studies they need to do, any surveys they need to do, sorry.
They seem to be being used as a default to consultation in some instances. And I'm just, so what is that contract for? What is the term of it and the value of it?
I don't have all that information on hand. I believe the contract is actually up for, we have to go back out this year. And I can't speak to whether it's being used more for consultation than.
No, I mean, that was more of a perception on my part, but I'm talking about the actual value.
I can get you that information.
And so all other consulting is just as needed and if budget allows, and are there policies or criteria or when you use contract consulting?
That's correct, yeah.
And through the chair, consulting is mostly zero-based in that it has to be rebudgeted.
It has to be rebudgeted. Meaning there is a line in everybody's budget, or there has to be a line in everyone's budget for consultants?
There are lines for consultants, but as you'll see from the report,
we have
some of the
limitations.
spending is based on other lines in the budget where we're just showing the consulting as spent, in that we do a net budget, and sometimes there is consulting that ends up being there as other professionals or someplace else in the budget.
I didn't understand what you said. So there is an overall budget for consulting, or it's just established by division
Through
based on a year-to-year basis?
you, Mr. Chair. So there's divisions that required every year will put a line in their budget for consulting. So for example, in my own area, there's a small budget in corporate finance. Those are examined every year at budget time. I believe they have been falling over time. And so it's budgeted on a needs basis. There are also budgets from time to time on a one-time basis, and those are what Mike was referring to, zeroed out every year. So if there's a particular project that's being undertaken that requires consulting resources, it would be put in the budget for that year and then taken out the following year once the project's completed.
So there's a line that says contract balance remaining. So does that apply to all contracts, and that's the value of the amount of consulting that is still remaining in the contracts to be used in 2016?
As through Mr. Chair, so with any contract, we always have an estimated value. As it gets consumed or used up during the year, there would be a balance that would be unused.
So for 2015, we would add It says budget and actual and contract balance remaining. Do we add the 2015 actual with contract balance to say there's still over 8 million left to be spent?
Through the chair, that shows how much might be spent on a contract. Not all contracts are spent to their limit.
No, but do you have authority then to spend up to another 4.7 million for other things? So it's kind of an...
Those would be for things as contracted.
Page 5. Okay, you know what, I'll just leave it. Thanks.
Sorry, Councillor Davis, you're done? Councillor Davis, sorry, you're done? Okay, are there any other questions of staff? I had one. Sorry, I had a question. I wanted, in the chart, there's a column for legal. Does this report differentiate between an ABC that hires a lawyer? How do you differentiate between a consultant, if they're considered a consultant or a contractor? Does it differentiate?
There is a definition of legal consultants that actually the city solicitor has agreed to, so that there are some legal agreements that aren't consultants and some that are. In the past, we've discussed planning matters where...
No, sorry, I mean, so hypothetically, an ABC goes out and hires a lawyer, gets an outside lawyer for legal advice. How do they differentiate, or how does this differentiate whether it's a contractor or a consultant? Because this column just says legal.
And in the end, it comes down to the type of advice they're getting. If it's someone that's acting, for example, if it was the TTC and it's someone that's acting in place of their lawyers, that would not be consulting. But if it's someone that is giving them advice in order to do something else, as opposed to just a staffing piece to replace their lawyers, then it would be consulting.
All right, okay, thank you. All right, does anybody want to speak? Councillor Grimes is moving receipt. Any other speakers? All in favor of receipt? Opposed? And that carries. Our next item is number 11, contract and service level agreement with Cogeco Data Services for an internal service provider. Sorry, and I held that. I had questions of staff. Morning, Mr. Meikle. So sorry, I'm just trying to understand. So this was, this report or recommendation is based on the Toronto Public Library issued an RFP, and their preferred proponent was Cogeco. And so we're not issuing an RFP for the same work for the city?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then I was trying to understand, there was a line in the report, it said that Bell Canada gave a quote. So Bell Canada gave a quote for this work? They were asked to give a quote?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we need two ISP service providers, and we have Bell under contract for until 2020. Bell has given us a revised pricing on the upgraded service that we need to be one of the two providers, and then the intent is for Cogeco to be the second ISP provider. And we need two because of the cumulative bandwidth requirements, but probably more importantly because of resiliency, to make sure that in the event one vendor has a failure, that the other one still allows us to have internet services.
Okay, so I guess what I'm trying to understand, so if I do the math on this, so the proposed revised quote from Bell was 7,872. Cogeco was 6,955. So it's roughly an $80,000 contract, and you're confident that this is an acceptable quote from Cogeco, and there won't be any issues? They're not going to come back and say, we've had unforeseen issues, we need to increase the price.
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, we don't expect that. Certainly, the ISP services that they provide the library have been reliable and without incident, so we expect the same for us.
Okay, and why, sorry, so I don't understand the rationale of not sending this out to market for an RFP.
Maybe I can answer that through you. So one of the things we're doing with shared services is looking at procurements where we can do things jointly or piggyback an existing procurement. It does a couple things. It gives us a wider reach. So for example, the library is actually a bigger consumer of internet than we are.
Yep, I understand.
We were to go out on our own because of the volumes, we would likely get a lower price than the library board. So by doing more joint public sector procurements or vendors of record, we can then take advantage of somebody else's better price. So we collectively, under the shared services projects, have been really increasing the amount of these joint procurements that we're doing, either jumping on a provincial vendor of record or one of the other agencies' vendors of records. We get quicker turnarounds and better pricing.
Okay, and there's not an issue between, so you don't send it out for RFP, but you have gone to another vendor and asked them for a quote?
So I believe the library went out on a competitive bid. As John mentioned, we do need two providers because of the backup. And then you see the prices listed there on page 3 that we obtained.
Right, and there's no, so because Cogeco, Bell lost out to Rogers, or sorry, Bell lost out to Cogeco at the library, for example, hypothetically speaking. So there's no due diligence that Bell could hypothetically sharpen their pencil and come back and say, we want the city business, we'll give you a better price.
I believe they've done that. So if you notice, their existing price was a monthly price of over $12,200. They brought it down to just under $7,900, $78, $72, but it's still above the Cogeco price of $69.55. So we believe we are getting the best market prices out there.
Okay, and so we have mechanisms in place. Cogeco's not going to come back a year from now and say that we've had, whatever, from our perspective, there's been issues and we need to increase the cost. Or we're going to increase your bill.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I cannot foresee that happening again. This is a different type of services than the WAN services that we've dealt with in the past. It's a fairly straightforward service. There's not a lot of investment that this company needs to make to provide these services, so we're pretty confident that this will be a solid contract.
So you can guarantee me you're not going to come back in 6 months and say Cogeco had issues and they have to increase the price?
I'll take that one. Through the chair, that would be a breach of their contract. And then we would be down a different avenue with litigation.
Right. So if they come back in 6 months and have to increase their price for some reason, is the contract canceled? Or you would just come back to us and say, Cogeco needs more money?
Again, through you, Mr. Chair, hard to predict the exact circumstances around a scenario like that. But we would have to do what's in the best interest of the city, and we would consider canceling the contract if they come back with trying to force a set of prices up on us that doesn't make sense.
Right, but what I'm trying to understand, Mr. Meikle, is so this hasn't gone out to RFP. We gave them a quota price based on the library board. So if they come back in 6 months, there's not a clause that automatically cancels it. You would come back to us and ask for a bump up.
Through the chair, the agreement that we're going to enter into is actually based on the RFP that the library did. So it's effectively the same agreement, terms and conditions that the library has with some slight modifications to reflect the City of Toronto. If they were to breach the contract, then IT will consult with legal with the appropriate course of action. If for some reason we need to change the service levels, that may, again, IT would do the proper due diligence with respect to that, and if that required a increase in contract, they would have to come forward and get the appropriate approvals. But the contract in of itself is the same one based in the library, and it will be governed as such.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions of staff? Okay, I will move the recommendations in the report. All in favor? Carried. Number 12, administrative penalty system for parking violations, and we do have one deputant, Mr. Derek Moran. Sorry, did Councillor Davis leave? Okay. Morning, Mr. Moran. You have 5 minutes to address the committee whenever you're ready.
As I explained to Mayor Tory at the Executive Committee, Mr. is a term of Admiralty maritime jurisdiction that refers to a subordinate inferior. If I've ever led the City of Toronto to believe in any way that I'm a Mr., then that would be a mistake, and to please forgive me. Just so we're clear on something, nowhere on the City of Toronto's website is there any defined definition for what exactly a deputante is. I'm only saying that because I was recently mocked online on Facebook in the Tender for Law group by the Scott Duncan. And I just want to point out that there's actually from what the City of Toronto has been able to give to me, any defined words, what those actually mean. So when I read through the report regarding this, I noticed that there's a page where Anna Kinistowski's name is there. I think it's Barry Randall's name. And Mike St. Amant's name is there, where they're supposed to put their signature, but there's no signatures. So I just figured, to make sure that everything you guys are doing is legal in regards to this AMP plan and lawful for the rest of us that don't work for the government and common law jurisdiction, it would just stand to reason that you guys wouldn't have a problem eventually getting around to signing that. I don't know why that wasn't signed, but maybe someone could take care of that. So one thing about these special screening officers, impartial screening officers, it's kind of a dumb question, but since they're going to be officers, they're obviously going to take the subscribed oath pursuant to Section 4 of the Public Officers Act. I brought this up recently at the Law Society of Upper Canada after speaking to City of Toronto lawyer Nicholas Rolfe. And Don Kwan, Cynthia Canlin, and another lady there weren't aware of Section 4 of the Public Officers Act. So I just want to read this out. Oaths of allegiance in office. It is not necessary for any person appointed to any office in Ontario or for any person called as a barrister or admitted as a solicitor to make any declaration or subscription or to take or subscribe any other oath in the following. And let's say I, Nicholas Rolfe, would sign their signature right there. Do swear or solemnly affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, or the reigning sovereign for the time being, her heirs and successors, according to law, not by law, but according to law. So help me God. Omit this phrase in an affirmation. And also such oath for the faithful performance of the duties of his or her office, or for the due exercise of his or her profession or calling, as may be required by any law in that behalf. So City of Toronto is going to make sure that these special screening officers are going to take that oath, right? Which would be a good idea, actually, based on what you said at the Toronto Police Services Board meeting a couple months ago, that open data transparency thing. I think it'd be great if everyone could be able to look up online the subscribed oath that every City of Toronto employee took. I want to ask if the City of Toronto is planning on complying with the Constitution with this plan also. Not many people, I think, realize Section 24.1. Enforcement of guaranteed rights and freedoms. Anyone whose rights or freedoms, as guaranteed by this charter, have been infringed or denied may apply to a court of competent jurisdiction to obtain such remedy as the court considers appropriate and just in the circumstances. So basically, that says I get to choose, if you guys give me a parking ticket, where I want to take this to court. You guys can't make me do this AMP thing. If I want to say take it to a court of equity, which is mentioned in 96.1 of the Courts of Justice Act, I'm just wondering, like, how are you guys planning on complying? That's a dumb question again, but you guys are going to comply with the Constitution, right? Before I forget, I also want to ask, I could have sworn that I read an article from Alison Jones from the Canadian Press on May 1st, who wrote that the Attorney General's office had actually told you guys you couldn't do this. Actually, Alison Jones says on Twitter to some guy named Colin, and the government didn't announce this. I thought, hey, whatever happened to that AMP's proposal? And was told, oh, we're not doing that now. So when she contacted the Attorney General's office, someone named Jenna Manone said, based on the feedback we received, well, basically it just says here, Alison Jones says that Ontario, the province of Ontario, scrapped this idea. So basically what's going on here is you've been told no by the Attorney General's office, and you guys are just saying, no, we don't feel like obeying the Attorney General's office of Ontario. So good luck with that, because it seems like you guys are about to commit fraud. So.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moran. Any questions of the deputy?
Again, I'm not a mister, Councilor Hainsey.
Sorry?
I'm not a mister. You know.
Okay, all right. Sorry, Councilor Davis, you held this? Do you have questions of staff?
I was just saying, I'm trying to get them answered here. I mean, we really hadn't heard much about this until this arrived on the agenda. And I'm just wondering if you can give us a really quick overview about what is the difference between this and the current system, what the authority, where the authority came from, how is it going to be implemented, what are the budget costs, budget implications?
The chair has left.
Well, don't say anything.
Good morning. The powers to move us from a parking system that's under the court system to an administrative penalty system comes under a regulation under the City of Toronto Act. That regulation was amended on July 1st, 2015 at the request of city staff, which removed the issues that we were having in moving to an administrative penalty system like our neighboring municipalities for some time. So what it essentially means is that we will be able to deal with parking offenses or violations outside of the court system. We will no longer have to rely on the court to approve the fines. We will have penalties that are approved by council and not also approved by the court system. In addition, we will be able to provide service in a manner in which council approves. That means that people will no longer only have the option of going in person, requesting a court date, and coming back for a court date. The proposal that we have creates a different service strategy. It says that people, for example, will be able to have their notice of violation assessed and done online, or they can come in person through appointment or on-demand service. I'm not sure if that captured everything, Councillor Davis, that you were looking at. The costs.
Mr. Chair, the costs are on page 6. So currently, in terms of operating costs, we currently spend about $66 million. There will, in 2017, because it's a transition year where we're going to actually have the current court-based tickets plus the new administrative penalties, there's a one-time transition cost to get us through that year. But then starting in 2018, our operating costs will go down. And there's one-time capital costs that are laid out, $5.2 million, just to cover off some digital photography that we would need to enhance this program and construction.
So the digital photography piece seems to be a key component, and that is the piece that's going to allow us to reduce the appearance costs for police officers?
Well, through the administrative penalty system, We will not have officers having to attend. The photos will enhance the ability of the screening officers to make their assessments. So that is certainly a part that we think is important going forward. As it happens, moving to this system at this time also coincides with the upgrade of the ticketing system that the Toronto parking enforcement staff have. So moving at this time not only gets us to the better system quicker, but also utilizes the change that's going to be happening with the parking enforcement equipment at the same time.
They're called what kind of officers?
The Toronto parking enforcement officers, the people who are issuing the tickets now will be the same people issuing the notices of violation.
Will they still be members of the Toronto Police Service?
This program has nothing to do with who issues it. There is no change being proposed as to who's issuing the notices of violation. That's a separate issue that council may debate in another forum on another issue.
We should deal with that. Right. So, how much public discussion has there been, and are you intending to have any public consultation, or are you intending to have a communication strategy? Because there'll be people who will say this is, just a more efficient tax grab.
I think the idea here is to get more avenues of service to the public, have a more efficient system. Currently, it takes somewhere between a year to a year and a half to get an initial court date on a parking matter. The new system, we're hoping to have matters dealt with within, at the outside, 60 days. We're letting people come and bring their disputes forward in a timely fashion. We have done some online surveys in terms of getting the public reaction to it. We do, of course, plan to have a very strong media plan so that in the new year, when this is going to be coming in place, and the current proposed plan is for May 15th, that the public is well aware of the new system and the various avenues for service and the ways that they can get further information. We will also be posting on the web all of the information about this system in advance of it.
So assuming the volumes of tickets are the same, why is it we're going to be able to be faster at bringing them to resolution than under the current system?
So we will be able to move it faster because we won't be relying on the court system at the end. We will be able to have screening officers deal with things at the front end without having to take it to court to have a judicial officer approve it. Sometimes people come forward and they aren't so much as disputing the fine amount, but they need time to pay. Under the current system, there's no ability for staff to engage in a discussion with someone who's violated a parking matter to determine a time to pay. This process will allow that. We would not be using judicial time for something that's very straightforward. We are limited to the amount of time that we have before the courts. The regional senior justice of the peace determines how many courts we can have for parking, and we can't control that.
There's going to be an appeal process of some sort.
That is correct.
So how is our appeal process?
Our last question.
We're setting up our own appeal process with our own panel of adjudicators. Surely they will have the same volume of appeals. You're saying that because we will have our own panel, we'll be able to schedule our own panels, we'll resolve more in advance that at the pre-appeal stage, that it will be faster.
We will also have the flexibility to hire more hearing officers. Currently, we have no control over that. Even if the city wanted to dedicate funds to that, we have no control over that right now. So the city will have the ability to respond to the volumes. And that means in terms of getting more officers in place for appeals if required, and also if we have less, we'll be able to adjust to that. We have consulted with our neighboring municipalities as to what their experiences have been, and in fact, appeals are at a much lower percentage in the neighboring municipalities than the appeals that we're having currently within the City of Toronto. So we don't know what the Toronto experience will be yet. That's why we have to go into it and have a little bit of flexibility and report back to you after the first year as to where they are. But are currently projecting that it should be a faster, more efficient process.
And you're confident we can set up and deliver this thing in a way with adequate resources to make it function properly?
There is a commitment from all three current bodies that within the city that provide it. That's the prosecution section within legal services, that's court services, and that's revenue services to make this happen.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Davis. Councillor Nunziata, you have questions?
Well, this was part of the request to find efficiencies and, correct? Yeah, so actually, there's a savings of 2.78 million, according to the report, which is great. This will also help, too, in the report that, correct me if I'm wrong, the report that we received a few months ago on the amount of revenue that we're losing on collecting fines.
Sorry, that's correct.
Because, that was correct, right? Okay, so thank you.
Okay. Councillor Grimes, any questions? Nope. Speakers?
Move the recommendation.
Councillor Davis, you wanted to speak as well?
I mean, I'll support the recommendations. I mean, from a policy and operational perspective and a efficiency perspective, it makes a lot of sense. I know that since I've been here 13 years, we've struggled with the inadequacy of the provincial scheduling application. We've struggled with getting justices of the peace. We've struggled to be able to resolve simple parking charges efficiently. I just want to make sure that if we're going to enter into a brand-new system that we are constructing ourselves and we are now delivering separately and committing significant funds towards, that in the development and planning and implementation stages, we put sufficient resources in to do it well. And Mr. CFO, when this budget comes, it can't be off the corner of the desk like a lot of other things that we do here. And you need to tell us what will make it successful and what it will cost to do that. Okay. And we need a good communication strategy for the public to understand what this new system will be, what their rights are, how it is different from the current judicial system of resolving these matters. It may be a good description of it soon, so we can put them in our newsletters. I mean, when this goes through council and we have to explain it to people, it would be very nice if we had a nice website, even somewhere that people can go to understand better than reading a 60-page report. Okay, thank you.
Our next item is GM 13.13, amendments to the purchasing bylaw and procurement processes policy. Staff have a short presentation. Do the members want the short presentation, or?
Yes, please.
Well, some of us have to leave.
This is a committee day, and councillors should expect to commit the day to it.
Not the day, no, sorry, Councillor Davis.
This was a very large agenda with many important things, so I would like a presentation.
You to hold every item down.
I can hold down whatever items I want, Councillor.
Sorry, councillors. That's your right, too.
So, Mr. Chair,
Okay,
members.
whenever you're ready.
We're good?
We're good.
I'm Mike Sanema, and I'm joined today by Mike Patchluck, the Director of Purchasing and Materials Management, to present a brief overview of the changes we're undertaking. Today, the purchasing bylaw is before you. Updating the bylaw will also result in updating of all the policies and procedures related to the procurement process. In addition to the bylaw before you today, we also have 3 other projects that are transforming city procurement. The Social Procurement Program, adopted by Council in May, which introduces supplier diversity and workforce development into the procurement process and is an important policy for the city's poverty reduction strategy. The Supply Chain Management Transformation Project, with implementation of SAP Ariba, adopted at last week's council, which will modernize the technology used in the procurement process, will drive more efficiencies and automate the procurement process from acceptance of bids through contracting, supplier performance, invoicing, and through to payment. And lastly, we have the PMMD program review, which will recommend strategic sourcing and category management approaches and change PMMD's organizational structure to move from a transactional-focused division to one that provides value-added strategic direction to the procurement of goods and services. The report is here before you because the purchasing bylaw requires a review every 5 years. We need to prepare the city for the comprehensive economic trade agreement with the EU and changes to the Ontario-Quebec Trade and Cooperation Agreement. We've chosen to adopt a supplier code of conduct to emphasize the importance of the supplier in the procurement process. This code of conduct is consistent with the Charbonneau Commission and the Bellamy Inquiry. We will align with the province's broader public sector procurement directive as a leading procurement practice in Ontario, and we are updating language in the purchasing bylaw to make it easier to read and to understand. I'll now hand over the rest of the presentation to Mike Patchlock, who will take us through some of the changes at a high level.
Thank you very much. As we've talked in the past with the Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement with the EU, we're expecting that ratification to be done by the end of this year or early 2017, and it'll apply to contracts for goods and services over $340,000 approximately, and construction services over $8.5 million. The Ontario-Quebec Trade and Cooperation Agreement is actually based on CETA, with the real difference being a lower threshold in which contracts over $100,000 for both goods and services and construction services will be captured. To be ready for these trade agreements, we are making a number of changes to the bylaw and to the procurement processes policy, many of which were already in practice today, but we haven't codified. For example, we're going to add an exemption section to kind of clarify that certain things like real estate matters do not flow through the purchasing bylaw, that distribution of grants also don't flow through the purchasing bylaw. We're going to clarify when we go out for an open competitive procurement, that is when we invite the world, and that will be at $100,000 and above. Right now, the city does that at $50,000 and above. Opening that space up will allow the city to do invitational quotations for up to $100,000. There will be many provisions related to non-discrimination, in that we can't use discriminate or exercise preferential treatment in the selection of our suppliers. Timelines and notices of intended procurement is the real key component from the trade agreements. The trade agreements will require us to post a notice of intended procurement in advance of any of our procurements. And for CETA, for procurements that are covered by CETA, that will help determine how long they have to be on market. If we do not plan well, they will have to be on market from at least 40 days from when the procurement was posted. There are ways in CETA to reduce that timeline down, often through electronic submission requirements, which we'll keep in mind as we do each procurement. We're also clarifying negotiations that will allow for negotiations prior to the award of an RFP, either using BAFO or some sort of consecutive negotiations. And this will be, we'll have to indicate this to proponents in advance as part of the notice of intended procurement. We're also changing the non-competitive exceptions and removing them from the procurement processes policy up into the bylaw. They're primarily the same as they are currently, although we're expanding them to reflect trade agreement non-competitive exceptions. Pre-award and post-award disputes are really important to the trade agreement, so we've clarified that in the bylaw. There's now a clear pre-award process in which the suppliers can challenge a declaration of non-compliance to me first, in which I can pause the process to complete the review. In post-award disputes, they'll have the opportunity to go up to the city treasurer, who will do an independent review of the process, and if the dispute has merit, I may end up having to terminate the contract that was awarded. I also want to point out that as part of CETA, there will be a requirement within 5 years of ratification that all notices of procurement is posted in one spot. That is for the federal, provincial, and all municipalities. We'll be working and keeping an eye on what the federal government is doing with respect to that. But my understanding is we'll have to make sure we link our website up to theirs. One of the major recommendations we're also making is a supplier code of conduct. These are a list of provisions that are currently in our procurement contracts right now, so that suppliers, when they submit a proposal, they're agreeing that they didn't collude, that they will identify all conflicts of interest and unfair advantages. They won't offer us gifts. We decided that it was important to move this into the bylaw, given the importance of the supplier in the procurement process. And we'll require them to sign a declaration that they agree to all of these provisions. With respect to illegality, that is a slight modification from what we have now. If we find a supplier has been convicted of bid rigging or collusion, we will automatically suspend them for 5 years. We won't wait to come out to ask council for permission. We'll simply automatically suspend them. As part of reinforcing these, the supplier code of conduct, we will have certain delegations to staff. For example, the treasurer, in consultation with the city solicitor, will be able to disqualify a supplier who's in ongoing litigation with the city. This is not intended to be any type of litigation. It is related to contracts awarded by the city and where they have a history of making frivolous or vexatious claims. The chief purchasing officer will also be able to disqualify a supplier for a breach of the code or to terminate a contract in the appropriate instance. And the city and chief purchasing officer will be able to temporarily suspend a supplier for 6 months for a breach of the code. We're clarifying that council will be able to suspend suppliers for 1 to 5 years for either poor performance or for breaches of the code as well. And because ethics is not just for the suppliers, we want to revise the employee ethics provision to align with the Toronto Public Service Bylaw. With respect to aligning with the broader public sector procurement directive, that is the directive that the Ontario government has issued to its agencies. We changed a lot of the procurement processes policy to align with that, and most of the items that we added are things that are already in practice, but we want to be clear about responsibilities, in particular who in the segregation of duties was responsible for what. We also clarified things with respect to evaluation and supplier debriefing and contract management. Also, we wanted to clarify the purchasing bylaw. It was written many years ago and written, unfortunately, by lawyers, so it was generally not the easiest to understand. So we wanted to revise it to try to be clearer. So the sections on award authority, in particular, were difficult to read because you had to read 4 or 5 sections to understand what it said. Now we're going to make it one section. You'll be able to understand it in one section. We want to revise the bid committee by renaming it to the bid award panel and changing the composition of the membership. Right now, this is a staff committee, but the composition of the membership rotates, and we want to fix the membership to be a little easier to operate. And we also have the clerk as a member, but the clerk doesn't have voting rights, and that's not an appropriate approach to committees. The authority levels, we're not recommending any changes right now, but we did want to highlight a few things to the committee. This little chart on the left shows municipalities and the amount they awarded in 2015, and on the right 2 columns it says where staff have authority to make awards. The city, of course, staff has authority effectively up to $20 million with the bid award panel, and then go to standing committee after that. In many municipalities around us, staff have unlimited authority for straightforward contract awards, with a few exceptions for Peel and York Region. But the size of award process is clearly much smaller in those municipalities. And the reason I wanted to flag this was it's often a balance between oversight of the procurement process and speed to get the contract awarded. Taking a report to standing committee does often add a month to the process, but it seems to be a reasonable balance. Right now in 2015, we had 19 contracts go to standing committee, and in 2014 there was 14 contracts, whereas bid committee does about 397 contract awards in 2015 and about 364 in 2014. There are a few consequential amendments with respect to the changes here. On the social procurement policy, we're actually expanding it. Now that we're moving open competitive procurement up to 100,000, we can improve the access to the procurement process between 50 and 100,000. We're modifying the access to information for members of council at various stages of the procurement processes policy. It has a reference in there requiring council approval for industry consultations. That is very difficult to exercise when you're trying to do market analysis and market soundings. So we're asking for that to be removed. And we're repealing 2 policies related to conflict of interest, excluding bids from external parties involved in the preparation of call documents, and restricting the hiring of former city employees. We're not actually removing them completely. We've revised the conflict of interest provision in the Supplier Code of Conduct, made it much broader to capture both these 2 scenarios. As a result, we don't need to have this 2 separate policies. The next steps, if council approves the bylaw and the changes, is that it would come into effect on January 1st, 2017. Purchasing and materials management and legal services will be working throughout the rest of the year on revising the existing procedures and creating new procedures to reflect these changes and to do the appropriate rollout and training to divisions and my own staff. And finally, in conclusion, Mike mentioned all these major projects that are underway. We're revising the purchasing bylaw, we're implementing social procurement, we're automating the supply chain, and we're looking to reorganize our PMD's organizational structure to provide strategic sourcing. All of these projects will help us transform how we procure, manage, and pay for goods and services of the city to still achieve best value and do it in the most efficient way possible.
Thank you, gentlemen. Questions of staff? Councillor Davis?
Should have this back up. Hold on.
Have you had an opportunity to brief any councillors on this?
Through the chair, we briefed Councillor Ainsley's office, and we provided a briefing note to the mayor's office.
Okay. So this proposes some very significant changes in our procurement policy. Would you agree?
This codifies existing practices and clarifies a number of things and makes us ready for the trade agreements.
And those trade agreements, can you remind me which trade agreements specifically? CETA and the...
And Ontario-Quebec Trade and Cooperation Agreement.
And have those agreements been ratified?
The Ontario-Quebec one has, and CETA, we're expecting it to be ratified at the end of the year, at least according to the sources in the province.
The city's position on CETA right now? Current position on CETA?
I think the City Council directed the city manager to put in submissions that we be exempted from the trade agreement.
Right.
However, that has not taken place, and we're preparing the city to be ready for its implementation.
So why should we put in place provisions for a trade agreement that has not yet been ratified? And why would we not wait at least until the ratification before we proceed to open the door for CETA in the City of Toronto?
Through the chair, we have not been told in our conversations with the province that there will be a transition period or implementation time. So we are preparing as if it will come into force. There is no actual, in what we've done, we've designed it in such a way that CETA is not specifically referenced. It's referenced to applicable trade agreements. So if CETA does not come into force, then certain sections will not be, like the timelines scenario will not be.
Why would we not do it the other way, to have it ready?
Councillor, can you let the staff finish, please?
Okay, he was finished. Why would we not have it ready for if and when these agreements are ratified, and then they could be introduced? They're obviously ready now.
We feel it's important to proceed now, not only because of the trade agreements, but because of our desire to have the Supplier Code of Conduct put in place and to clarify the bylaw. So instead of having separate reports, doing 2 pieces, we're recommending it now. The enforced date is January 1st, 2017, and if for some reason between now and then we find out that CETA doesn't take place, we can still report back on changes.
Could we not approve the other provisions, the ethics provisions, the other sections, and not proceed with the implementation of those related to trade agreements?
Through the chair, we've designed the bylaw and the procurement process that they all work together. So we couldn't really just take one piece out and proceed with the rest.
The ethics provisions for suppliers and contractors is reliant on the provisions that are in here for CETA?
There are other provisions in the document with respect to clarity, with respect to evaluation team. There are things that will enhance the process, and it's not as easy to separate the two.
Would you agree that there might be a high degree of interest amongst councillors on this report that will spark a lot of discussion at council on an agenda that is going to be absolutely packed with many, many other things? And could this not wait till the fall so that councillors have an opportunity to read a 60, 70, 90-page document, 60-page document?
Page 9. If it's the will of committee to defer the report to the fall, it can be deferred to the fall.
And go and talk to councillors, many of whom will have a high degree of interest in this.
With respect to
Before it
CETA, that is beyond my control. The ratification of CETA is beyond.
I recognize that.
Come on, Michael, you can ratify it.
I put my glasses on, I said 60.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor, do you have other questions? Okay, other questions by the committee members? No. Councillor Davis, you held it. Did you want to speak?
I have
Councillor
two
Grimes?
motions. If the first one fails, I'm going to move the second one. Although in light of the last answer, it may not be possible. I move the first to defer consideration of this item until the September meeting, and I would defer consideration, and I suggest that the staff go and meet with interested councillors. And if that fails, that we refer back those sections on the trade agreements and have them reported on separately in the fall. I don't know if that's possible. Mr. Pachalak said that was not possible. So I'm wondering if that is possible. Maybe, Mr. Chair, you could ask if that's possible.
Questions of the mover? No questions of the mover? Okay. Other speakers? Sorry, I saw Councillor Grimes' hand.
Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to move the staff recommendations as they are. I don't think we need to piecemeal this. I think the provision for CETA being in or out are been answered by staff. I'm prepared to not support the deferral and move the staff recommendations before us onto council.
Okay. Other speakers? No? Okay. All right, thank you. I'm going to be supporting the staff recommendations as well. I understand Councillor Davis is concerned that it's a large report, but it's also been live on the city website. When did it go up? When did it go up? Yeah. Yeah, so it's been up for over a week. Our colleagues should be well aware of it. I would hope their staff would be aware of it. And, you know, if they want to have a lengthy debate at City Council about it, that's their right. But I think we have deadlines here. The staff have done a lot of work. I'm very happy with the work that they've done. And I think the adequate provisions and safety mechanisms have been put in place. I think they're needed. You know, I can think back over the past 10 years of the number of times that we've awarded somebody a contract and then they come back and they try and change it, or, you know, we award a contract to somebody and I ran into somebody in the food court in the Eaton Center and they tell me that, you know, whoever won it was a crook. And, you know, I think we need better provisions. I think those provisions have been put in place. There's other trade agreements that are coming in as the deputants have just said, or staff have just said, you know, there's no transition period that we have to be prepared for those agreements when they're put in place. And I think they've done the right amount of work to prepare us for those. So I will be supporting the recommendations. Okay, so we have Councillor Davis's deferral motion. All in favor, Councillor Davis's deferral motion? Councillor Davis wants to record a vote. All in favor? Councillor Davis, opposed? Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Ainsley, Councillor Grimes, that loses. Councillor? Right, so the next motion, the proposed amendments that relate to trade agreements be referred to their treasurer for a report back to September 5th, 2016 Government Management Committee. All in favor? Opposed? That loses. And then adoption of the recommendations in the report. All in favor? Opposed? All in favor of the recommendations? Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Ainsley, Councillor Grimes, opposed? Councillor Davis, and that carries. Okay. Our next item is GM 13.15, Don Mills Civitan Arena Proposal Replacement, Don Mills Road and Eglinton Avenue East. It was held by Councillor Davis. Councillor Davis, questions of staff? Councillor Davis, questions of staff on number 15?
I'd just like to, I had my questions answered. I'll just release that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Davis, sorry, are you moving the recommendations in 15?
No, I'm just releasing.
Releasing it? Okay,
someone else.
I will move the recommendations in number 15. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Number 17, amendment to Interfleet Incorporated Automatic Vehicle Location Contract Number 47015-982. I held it. Does anybody have any questions of staff on this? No, I just, the one I was just trying to clarify. In the report, it says we have 5,200 vehicles. There's 400 currently are using this mechanism for tracking. And then on one of the pages in the report, it says that they can be placed, the tracking of the vehicles can be done on a digital map. And that's currently not being done? And what are the timeline? Are all departments being told? So we're putting this money into using these devices. They can be done on a digital map. Are the plans to have them all like garbage, solid waste, for example? Or is this is it all being done as a matter of process, or is each department, for example, they can decide yay or nay on tracking of their vehicles?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So part of the plan and this amendment is to centralize the oversight of the AVL, or Automated Vehicle Location Devices, under the Fleet Services Division. And there are a multitude of different options for what AVL can do. For instance, with transportation, we can measure not only where the vehicles are, but whether the piece of equipment may be sanding or salting, or in Parks, Forestry, and Recreation if there's a boom. And what you can do then is use that information operationally to overlay and do predictive analysis year over year as to where you might see problems. So as opposed to the digital map, that is the case in all situations if you want to monitor vehicle location. I don't know if that answers your question. Or?
So we got 5,200 vehicles, 400 are using the technology currently. When this is fully in place, all 5,200 vehicles will be using we'll have this mechanism available for use, and we'll be using it?
Mr. Chair, no. Currently what we do is we do an operational analysis to install these devices where it makes sense. There are some ongoing and very real costs associated with AVL with respect to airtime.
Sorry, let me ask it another way. Sorry. So we're increasing the contract by $380,000. So in layman terms, I would expect that we're putting more of these mechanisms on vehicles, so we'll be able to track their presence, and they're going on a digital map?
That's correct. We're installing it on more. Will it be all 5,200? No, not necessarily. We're doing that operational analysis to install it where it makes sense operationally.
Okay, so currently we have 400, so we're going to increase it by 380,000. How many more vehicles does that equip?
Again, about 60% of the costs are related to airtime and 40% are related to hardware. So
How many vehicles are you expecting?
The 380,000 might double that number to, say, 800.
Okay. And the vehicles that we're doing with the AVL device, is that going to be, or is it available in a real-time format or open data format being released to the public? For example, and the reason I'm asking, solid waste trucks, for example, there's municipalities that release that information in real-time open data. People have created apps so they know when the garbage truck's going to approximately roll down the street, and they can put their bins out.
Mr. Chair, so it's currently not available in an open data format, but that is part of the larger plan, is to look at the real-time aspects, the open data. And there are various levels of where the tracking, if you're looking real-time, there's there's additional costs that go where if you want to know where that vehicle is minute by minute versus what we would call a ping approach is instead of knowing where that vehicle is minute by minute, we ping it and can see that the vehicle is sitting here or there. So there's some differences in cost, and that's more of the operational analysis around the.
So with
around
these,
the options.
so with these devices, is a time lag?
Pardon me?
With these devices on a vehicle, there's a time lag?
A time lag? No, so to explain is, so you can do as opposed to real-time monitoring, you would typically see real-time monitoring in emergency services operations, fire, police, paramedic services. Those have real-time monitoring of their vehicles. They can tell where every vehicle is at any given second. Parks, Forestry, and Recreation, you may not need that, but if you want to ping it and see where is that vehicle right now, that's the information you would get back. And there's a difference in the cost between those two.
Okay, all right, thank you. Are there other questions of staff on this? Nope. Speakers? Nope. I will move the recommendations. All in favor? Carried. We are on, number 20, new memorandum of understanding for the Kipling Station redevelopment. Councillor Davis?
I'm just going to release that.
Councillor Davis is releasing number 20. Are you moving the recommendations?
No?
Councillor Grimes is moving the recommendations on number 20. All in favor? Carried. Number 25, non-competitive procurement for service continuity planning by potential labor disruption. Councillor Davis, you held it?
Just please explain what it is we contracted for and why, and how much it was.
Through the chair, so we contracted for picket line monitoring services in preparation for potential labor disruption this year.
And is that security services?
No, this is, we actually hired, or we contracted for private investigating skills to help facilitate movement of people, collection of evidence at the picket lines in the event that there was a disruption.
Private investigators. Have we ever hired private investigators before to monitor our picket lines?
Yes, we did so in 2012. That was part of the plan in 2012 as well. And in 2009, I'm being told.
That is not standard.
So for the past three potential labor, or the past three plans that we put together, this was standard as part of the plan.
So why didn't you find it within your existing budget?
So there were a couple of issues. The primary issue was the availability of staffing coming from the existing complement to support the service delivery plan. And the second was the unique skill required for this particular purpose.
We didn't use this service because there were no strikes.
Yes, that's correct, but
Why do we have to pay for it?
Question of the chair. I'm just afraid that we're getting into the confidential matters in the attachment. So I guess my question is, should we go in camera for those details to be discussed? No? Sorry.
I think what David is alluding to is that some of these answers may involve the security question. So.
This is not a security question. It has to do with money. Why did
Yeah,
we
I think
pay for something we didn't use?
The rationale for why and when we started to procure those services are talked about in the purple paper. So to answer about those, any of those questions that involve the purple paper, I think it's probably best if we do.
I'd like to know why it is confidential.
So the reason why the attachment is confidential is to ensure that we don't undermine any future plans that we have to put in place 4 years from now.
If it is labor relations, why didn't it go to the Labor Relations Committee?
So this is specifically around our authority within the contract and the fact that we had to go over the authority of the contract a couple of times in the course leading up to the deadline.
We went over the contract and we didn't even use the services.
Through you, through the chair, we did use the services. There wasn't an actual strike, but there were service provided. And we could talk about
Like having
what
them
that
on
service is.
standby? Is this kind of like standby pay?
People don't go on standby for free. People don't get an organization ready to respond for free. You have to pay for that service.
through that with TTC, remember?
Well, if this is standby pay for private investigators, then I definitely will vote against. And I'd like to speak. I will not be supporting the recommendation. This money could be found internally in some division to provide standby pay for private investigators for picket lines is not something that I'm prepared to support expanding the budget for. Thank you.
Councillor Grimes, you wanted to speak? Okay, other speakers? Okay, all in favor of the recommendations?
Could I have a recorded vote, please?
I guess. All in favor of the staff recommendations? Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Ainsley, Councillor Grimes, opposed? Councillor Davis, that carries.
Point of order.
Next item,
Point of
GM
order.
13
Point of order.
Sorry?
We have 2 items left. I'm going to move that we go to
Extend the meeting to finish.
12:45 to 12:45.
Why don't we finish the meeting? We'll go quicker.
Councilor Nunziata, go on. I have to go, so I'm going to move to 12:45. We'll see when we get to there.
Okay.
There's 2 items that gives us,
Councillor Councillor Grimes is moving to extend the meeting to 12:45 to finish the agenda. All in favor? Opposed?
Mr. Chair, those are 2 different concepts in one motion. He said 12:45. You suggested to complete the agenda. I support moving to complete the agenda.
I move to 12:45.
Right. So we're going to debate this until 12:45.
No, the motion was to
my motion is to
12:45.
extend
I'm
to
in favor of
12:45.
extending to 12:45.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to extend until 12:45. All in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, item 13.33, compliance with the City of Toronto policies on French language communication and advertising, held by Councillor Davis.
I want to know how this relates to our multilingual policy and whether they are related. Because I know there's a motion to report back on our multilingual policy sometime soon, and I'm wondering if they can be coordinated.
Would somebody like to answer?
Maybe, you know what? I'll just let it go. There's no appetite, no...
Jackie D'Souza from the city manager's office was going to be here for this item, or is it Fiona? Sorry, Fiona.
Councillor Davis, would you like to repeat your question, please? I'll restart your clock.
I just wondered if there is an outstanding report request, as I recall, on multilingual policy, and I'm wondering if the French language policy is related, or whether, because we have adopted French as an official language, I believe, then it is different and should be reported on as 2 separate, maintained as 2 separate policies.
So the direction to review the multilingual policy was referred to the city manager and is currently in our work plan for Strategic and Corporate Policies 26 work plan, and we're working towards bringing forward the revised policy to the fall. I think currently the policy does include French language, so right now we're really at the early research stages, doing some jurisdictional reviews, interviewing some key subject matter experts, but I think our intent would be to bring one policy forward.
Including the French language policy?
Including the French language policy.
So have you seen the recommendation that's in the agenda today
I have it before me.
from the French Language Advisory Committee?
I do, and one of the things that we were planning on doing was consulting with them as we're developing the multilingual policy to ensure that we've incorporated their input related to French language services.
So would it be compatible to just adopt this? And that you will consider these in the way that you think together, or and in consultation with the French Language Advisory Committee. Are you comfortable if we just move forward with these recommendations?
Through the chair, yes, I'm totally comfortable with that.
Great, thank you. Then I'll just move adoption, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, I have a technical amendment from staff that they delete city clerk's office protocol service from the recommendation. Okay. All in favor of the amendment? Item is amended. All in favor? Carried. And our last item is the waste diversion services in city facilities. And I have one deputant, Emily J. Alfred, waste campaigner from the Toronto Environmental Alliance. Morning, you have 5 minutes to address the committee. The committee then can individually ask you questions for up to 5 minutes, and then we bring it in what's called internally, and we can ask questions to staff on this item, and then we debate it. And you have 5 minutes to start whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks. Is this microphone is on? Okay, great. Thank you. So, good morning. My name is Emily. I'm the senior campaigner for the Toronto Environmental Alliance, or T. We're a grassroots group with more than 50,000 supporters across Toronto. My focus at T is on waste reduction and on advocating for policies that help Torontonians get to zero waste. I know that Toronto residents, businesses, and visitors want to do their part to reduce, reuse, and recycle and compost their waste. Unfortunately, we've seen that many city facilities, including libraries, community rec centers, and parks, do not have good waste diversion services or signage. I hope that this is something that this committee can help to rectify, as it is an ongoing problem that we've seen over a number of years. Last summer, T partnered with an organization called the Council of Agencies Serving South Asians for a leadership program. Working with a group of 8 volunteer leaders, we discussed waste and recycling issues they faced in Scarborough and identified ways to improve them. Something that came up over and over was the difficulty in knowing what to recycle and how to sort waste, as the rules are different in every building. As a group, we developed a plan and looked at city facilities in Scarborough, where most volunteers lived. The volunteers, with the help of 2 summer students, visited 12 city buildings, including libraries, community centers, outdoor pools, and rec centers. They took photos and spoke to staff. What they found was very mixed. They found that there was a need for more signs and clear signs on every bin. They found there was a need for more recycling bins and a need for organics bins. I have some pictures that I can send to you later, but I'll put up this map. These are the facilities we looked at in Scarborough. So I've got a list of the names, and there was a very mixed results. I'll show you a few examples. This was from Scarborough Civic Center. And at Scarborough Civic Center, there was organics collection, waste, recycling. There was even battery collection. But this is Milliken Community Center in Ward 41, and this is the bathroom with a garbage can full of paper towels that isn't going to a green bin. So to speak a little bit more on these things, in terms of signage, I grew up in Toronto. I've grown up with Toronto's recycling system. I'm a waste campaigner for T. I know waste rules very, very well, and I think I take that for granted. There was one experience I had that really opened my eyes. I walked into a community center with a volunteer, and we saw a blue bin with a recycling symbol on it, like this one on the bottom left. And she said, "What goes in that bin?" And I said, "It's a blue bin, you put recycling in there." And she said, "I don't know what recycling goes in that bin." Because in the apartment building she lived in, they didn't have city waste collection. So she didn't know that you could put paper and cans and bottles in the same container. So I thought this was great that this library had recycling bins. She said, "I'm confused, I don't know what goes there." So it's a really simple change that I think we can make that will improve diversion. We also found that some facilities don't have blue bins at all. Again, speaking personally, I love to swim and I use outdoor pools all year, or all summer. I use indoor pools in the winter. Sadly, though, almost none of these facilities have recycling bins in the change rooms or inside the buildings at all. They'll have a garbage bin, and that's it. And frankly, I see parents with kids, water bottles, paper and stuff. They're not going to carry all that recycling outside till they get to the park, till they find a big recycling bin. And finally, most city buildings don't have green bins. Even buildings that have kitchens and have food waste, many of them just had a garbage bin in the kitchen. So while our volunteers only looked at a dozen buildings, what they found matches the experience I've seen in city facilities across the city. We know that there are some buildings like this one that can do much better. I think this building boasts that it has a zero waste goal and it's achieved 90% waste diversion. It's a big sign by the elevator, which I think is great. The reason I'm hoping that you guys can talk about this today is that right now the city is developing a long-term waste strategy. The long-term waste strategy is talking about how we can increase diversion for the city to extend the life of the landfill. And the waste diversion strategy is, or the waste strategy is going to be talking about using better education and also enforcing the city's bylaws. I think it would be very bad form, to say the least, for the city not to follow its own waste diversion bylaws in city buildings. I think this is a great opportunity to use city buildings as a place to do education. And also, I just want to say that as someone who follows this policy closely, I've actually seen this come up before council in the past and nothing has been resolved. So in 2010, there was a report from a waste diversion task force showing that some divisions achieved 70% or higher waste diversion and that more work needed to be done. In 2012, as part of the budget process, council directed solid waste to work with the facilities management to develop a plan to get green bins in all buildings, and that has not happened either. So I think I've spoken to staff individually at these facilities, talked to councillors, but it seems like the only way that this can be resolved is for this committee to take it very seriously. Thanks. Oh, I also, sorry, I have a letter from one of the members of the volunteer group, and he tried to email this in, but I don't know if it got in for the clerk's deadline, so I just brought a copy for you to see.
Okay. Councillor Grimes, you have questions for the deputy?
Mr. Chairman. So Emily, you saw the recommendations here. You got the recommendations for you?
Yes.
So one's to identify a plan to increase access to and signage for blue and green. You're happy with that?
Yep.
Then I guess we report back, this will go back to works for sure, where it should go, correct?
Yes.
Is there anything else you would add in there that's not there?
I think maybe a timeline on it, because the long-term waste strategy will be discussed at Public Works next week. So I don't know how this could get incorporated into that. Maybe if there was a timeline to make sure that there was accountability, because there will be a lot of other waste strategy things going on, and I'm sure a lot of staff will be focusing on those things. So
You're kind of happy with the wording we have here?
I like the wording. I would just, maybe put a deadline.
Okay. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks.
Councillor Davis, you have questions of the deputy?
Did the audit look at the garbage bins outside city facilities in parks?
Yes, we looked at some parks. Parks don't have green bins at all, but there were recycling bins in parks, usually beside every garbage bin. So that was pretty consistent, and that was good.
Okay. One of the things the city approved some years ago was a ban on water bottles. Yep. And the selling of disposable water bottles, but the policy also exempted those parks that didn't have access to water, and something like almost 400 parks were exempt from the policy because there was no water on site. So do you think that making sure we have water available for refillable bottles would be a good strategy as well?
I think so. I think that would be a great move to reduce water bottle use, for sure.
Okay.
There's also just one other thing related to parks. I was recently surprised that if you apply for a special events permit to hold an event on a city street, you're required to present a waste reduction plan, and that includes using organics and having big clear signs and volunteers to help ensure that all the waste from that street event, like Taste of the Danforth or something, gets diverted. But if you hold an event in a city park, you're not required to use organics, and you actually have to hire a private contractor.
Private hauler.
Yeah, because the city will not provide organics inside a city park, which I find very confusing that the city won't provide city service in a city park. So I didn't understand that. I asked a staff and they didn't understand either, but I think that's a contradiction that confuses me as well as many others.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Nunziata, you have a question of the deputy?
Yeah, just, you mentioned, and it's not included in the recommendation, that there are some city-operated facilities that don't even have the blue box.
Yes.
Yeah, so maybe we can include that in, and that it'd be mandatory that all of the city-owned facilities have them. We should be enforcing that.
Yeah,
They should have them.
I absolutely agree. I believe
Yeah.
the city has a the mandatory recycling bylaw, or I don't know exactly what it's called, requires that any customers of city services use all city services for waste services. So anyone who gets city garbage pickup has to use recycling and organics. So that's why I say it seems like the city's not following its own bylaw in terms of waste services in
So
cities.
it should be part of it, eh? Huh?
Okay. Thank you, Emily.
Thanks.
Speakers? Councillor Grimes? Sorry, Councillor
Question to
Grimes. just asked
staff.
a question.
Can we put a timeline on this? Is the deputy asking for a timeline? Is there a timeline we can put on here, adjust this?
Unfortunately, Josie or Jim aren't here. I mean, we'll try to do this and respond to the motion as quickly as we can.
So it'll be included in the long-term waste strategy, so can we,
Honestly, I don't know when that's scheduled. It's in the work plan. I know it's
Okay, so in
coming.
the work
I know
plan, it's
Public
included in
Works
the long-term
is
waste-
working on it. I just
Long-term waste strategy
Okay.
is at Public Works this cycle.
This
okay,
cycle? Okay.
okay.
Thank you.
Speakers? Sorry. Speakers? Sorry, Councillor Davis, still
So
questions to
anything
staff?
related to facilities would be here, but not parks. Is that right?
I believe
Even though
but I would.
this is a very mixed-up jurisdiction,
Yeah.
solid waste.
There,
You know what, I'll wait. and-
there are three bodies, three divisions
Go to
involved
works.
in this: Parks, Energy and Environment, and the Waste.
Because I'd like an update on the water bottle policy, the disposable water bottle policy, which I think applies to parks and facilities. Facilities has the water bottle ban policy applied to it as well.
Are you speaking or asking a question?
Maybe I'll just move a motion to ask facilities to report in September on the disposable water bottle policy.
Okay. Okay. I want to thank you for coming in. As I was just saying to the CFO, even as we sit in this room, there's two bins in this room. One over there does litter and recycling, and one over there comes with a green bin. And in the Scarborough Civic Center, for example, in our staff area, we have recycling, garbage, in a green bin, and there's committee rooms where there aren't any green bins. We have the same problem in the council chambers when we have our community council meeting. So, I think that we do need some rationalization. I think we do need better signage. I take the GO train every day. The bins, although not, they use symbols, so they're clear, and they're all over the place. They're clearly marked. And I think we could do a much better job in our facilities. And in our parks, I've had instances where we've had nonprofit community events where we have to haul our own garbage out and not using city services. So I know that can be an issue for people as well. It's cheaper for them not to divide up between green bin recycling and garbage when you're running a nonprofit event and trying to make sure it's a nonprofit event and you're not losing money at it. So I want to thank you for coming in. And I think that's all in favor of this item? Sorry, Councillor Davis has an item or motion. Chief Corporate Officer reports to the September 5th meeting with an update on the water bottle ban, Government Management Committee meeting?
Yes, sorry.
September 5th Government Management Committee meeting with an update on the water bottle ban,
Maybe water bottle policy.
water bottle policy. You ladies are laughing at me. It's Monday and I need more coffee. Okay. So the September 5th Government Management Committee meeting with an update on the water bottle policy in city facilities. All in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Carried. Item is amended. You're opposed? Okay. Did you want to record a vote? Nope. Okay. So that passes.
No, I was opposed too.
Sorry, let's try that again. I didn't see you, Councillor Nunziata. All in favor of the amendment?
Could I have a recorded vote?
All in favor of the amendment? Councillor Davis, Councillor Ainsley. Opposed? Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Grimes. That loses on a tie.
And what happened to Grimes' motion?
He doesn't have a motion.
Well, what happened to the item, the motion that was?
We're voting. Let's go. We're voting.
So I'll move adoption of the motion that's before us.
That's what we're voting on.
All in favor? Carries unanimously. Confirming bill. Councillor Grimes?
Government Management Committee pass and declare as a bylaw the contemporary bill to confirm the legislative proceedings of the Government Management Committee acting under the delegated authority of its meeting June 13, 2016.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Motion to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, everyone.
I was ready to go tell Josie to go for us. To go do what? Your motion.